Chapter 215. They looked around, but it was obvious that Yu Qianqiu had run away. A core formation realm disciple had escaped from a cultivator in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. He had disappeared without a trace, and it was inexplicable. Qing Yu, who was floating in the air, had an ugly expression. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this was her humiliation. Did Yu Qianqiu leave supporting Immortal Island just like that? Oxihai groaned in pain from the bottom of his heart. He was really optimistic about Yu Qianqiu's potential. Especially everything that had happened now, it made him sigh endlessly. At such a young age, Yu Qianqiu already had such means. However, everything was impossible now. Yu Qianqiu had really left. They flew to Qing Yu's side, and Oxihai asked superfluously, "Senior, did Yu Qianqiu run away?" Qing Yu looked around with a gloomy expression. There were only a few clouds in the blue sky, and below them was a vast sea. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, where could he run to? Could it be? He stared at supporting Immortal Island, which was shrouded in mist. Oxihai understood what he meant, and he said in astonishment, "Senior, do you suspect that he went back to supporting Immortal Island? That's impossible. When we just came out, the island's protective formation sealed supporting Immortal Island again. He can't go back. Why don't Senior go back to supporting Immortal Island to look for him?" Qing Yu did have that thought, but even if Yu Qianqiu went back to hide, what right did he have to search supporting Immortal Island? He pondered for a moment, shook his head and said, "There's no need. There's still a long way to go. I don't believe that this brat will never show himself in the cultivation world. Please bid farewell to sect leader Feng on my behalf. I won't go down anymore." With that said, he flew away without looking back, disappearing into the distance in the blink of an eye. The few of them sent him off with their gazes before exchanging glances. All of them shook their heads and smiled bitterly. They then sized up the surroundings under the clear sky and bright sun. Such a bright and clear world was disturbed by Yu Qianqiu like this, and it seemed rather strange. "Let's go back." Oxihai sighed as the few of them dived towards Fuxian Island. After returning to Penglai Pavilion, Oxihai told Feng Xiangtian and others in detail what happened just now. Everyone was stunned and surprised. Qing Yu, who had the cultivation of the final phase of nature's test, didn't catch Yu Qianqiu and let him run away? Guan Weiwu and Ferdinand looked at each other and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In the main hall of the Wanfen Garden, Ma Jiugu, who was holding a walking stick, was standing in the middle of the hall with Lan Bingshue's support. She was looking at Hibiscus, who was sitting motionlessly on a chair. Tears were silently rolling down Hibiscus's beautiful face. Obviously she was restrained. Lan Bingxue looked at the face that was even more beautiful than hers, and her expression was indescribable. After the banquet was over, Ferdinand angrily returned and greeted Ma Jiugu, "Jiugu." There was quite a commotion above supporting Immortal Island just now. What? Could it be that Qing knew that old fellow had made a move on Yu Qianqiu? What happened? Ma Jiugu turned around and asked. Hibiscus, who couldn't move, looked at her father anxiously. "Hey, that brat was a bit impulsive. At first, the sect leader didn't plan to do anything to him. He just wanted to put on a show in front of Qing Yu, who knew that when he saw that his master didn't say anything to help him, he actually cut ties with Guan Weiwu in front of everyone. Their master-disciple relationship ended there. The sect leader was also angry and expelled him from the supporting Immortal Island in public. It's funny that Qing Yu chased Yu Qianqiu to the outside of the supporting Immortal Island. In the end, with Qing Yu's cultivation of the final phase of nature's test, she couldn't catch Yu Qianqiu and let him escape. Heh. I really don't know how that brat has such ability. It's really incredible." Ferdinand shook his head and smiled bitterly. "That old fellow Qing Yu didn't catch Yu Qianqiu?" Ma Jiugu was stunned. Lan Bingxue was also shocked. Hearing this, Hibiscus, who had tears in her eyes, immediately relaxed. Her large eyes flickered. Others might not know, but she knew that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to appear and disappear unpredictably. It was normal that others couldn't catch him. He escaped, but from now on he is no longer a disciple of supporting Immortal Island. Without the protection of supporting Immortal Island, De Luo sect and Ong Kwangtsung will definitely not let him go. Zai. Jiugu, why didn't you come forward to persuade the sect leader? I believe that if you had come forward, this matter wouldn't have escalated to this point, Ferdinand asked. I'm old and a little muddle-headed. I never interfere with the decisions of the supporting Immortal Island. Ma Jiugu turned around and stared at Hibiscus and asked, I heard that your girl's face was cured by Yu Qianqiu. Yes. Ferdinand nodded and said, this disciple will not hide it from you. Yu Qianqiu went to the demon domain and got a lot of spirit grasses. He secretly hid them and didn't hand them over. Instead, he secretly refined a furnace of Rui Dan for Rong. Just like that, Ronger's face was cured. Rui pill. Even Ma Jiugu couldn't help but exclaim, is it the legendary Rui pill that can keep youthful, detoxify, nourish one's face and make one immune to hundreds of poisons? According to Yu Qianqiu, it should be. You didn't see the appearance of the Rui pill at that time. Not only did it give off a pill halo, but it also emitted 7 colored rays of light. It was the first time in my life that I saw such a pill. It was an eye-opener. Ferdinand sighed. Hearing this, Lan Bingxue looked at Hibiscus with an envious expression. Which woman didn't want to stay youthful? Your girl is so lucky. Sigh. If I had encountered such a pill in the past, I wouldn't have gotten the name Ma Jiugu. Lan, let's go. Let's not look at it lest we get envious. Let's go. Let's go. Ma Jiugu shook her head and sighed. She slowly walked out with Lan Bingxue's help. When Yu Qianqiu was being chased by Qing Nu and was about to enter the cloud, he was scared out of his wits when he looked back. The other party actually teleported in front of him. As soon as he entered the cloud, he immediately flashed back to Utopia without saying anything. He didn't dare to be long-winded. A cultivator at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage was simply too terrifying for him. The reason why he disappeared into the cloud was that he didn't want to expose the secret that he could disappear into thin air. Who knew that he would almost be killed? After appearing in Bai Suzhen's room in the Misty Palace, he finally felt safe. He breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Bai Suzhen suddenly looked back. Seeing him like this, she walked up to him and asked with concern, "What's wrong?" "Damn it. I'm so unlucky today. I was just expelled from the supporting Immortals Island, and now I'm being chased by a cultivator at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage by Ong Kwang Tsung. Just a little bit more. If he had killed me before I could react, I might not have been able to come back. I was so scared," Yu Qianqiu said in a relaxed manner after the fright. "You were expelled from the supporting Immortals Island? Why would a cultivator from Ong Kwang Tsung want to kill you? Is it because you helped me investigate the 4 treasures? Bai Suzhen grabbed his arm. Especially when she saw the long hem of his robe. He was naked behind his buttocks and his legs were exposed in front. Who knew what kind of danger he had encountered? Yu Qianqiu gently pressed her hand and said with a smile, "Sister, don't think too much. It's not your fault. It's my fault." Bai Suzhen, on the other hand, didn't think so. She only thought that he was comforting her. She bit her lips and said, "I can take my time with my matters. You must pay attention to your safety outside." In her heart, there was nothing more important than Yu Qianqiu's safety. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid it's too late now. I believe it won't take long for the whole cultivation world to know that I was expelled from the supporting Immortals Island. At that time, I'm afraid that the Daoist sect and Ong Kwang Tsung will cast their net to find me. It's not convenient for me to show myself in public for a while." "Then you shouldn't go out during this period of time." Bai Suzhen's peerless features gently lifted as she looked at him worriedly. Yu Qianqiu was a little dazed. He had the urge to hug and kiss her. Just when he was thinking about it, his divine sense suddenly fluctuated. Someone was looking for him. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and said, "It's news from the Pillar of General's office. Could it be that there's an improvement in the mission that I gave to little Tian? Sister, I have something to do. I'll go out for a while." As soon as he finished speaking, he took off his long robe and put it on. Then he disappeared without a trace. Bai Suzhen bent down to pick up the torn clothes on the ground and held them in her hands. Her pretty face was filled with worry. Chapter 216. The rear garden of the National Pillars Mansion had become a forbidden area. Actually, there was nothing they could do about it. At this time there were many people in the rear garden. There were adults and children, and all of them were dressed shabbily. None of them were presentable, and they all looked at the surrounding courtyard with fear. No one dared to make a sound, and there were probably more than 100 people. These people were brought here by Ling Feng and the others while they were cultivating in the capital. Nowadays the three of them could be said to be living a comfortable life. They cultivated in peace, and with the nourishment of spirit stones and spirit pills, their cultivation was rising rapidly. In the past it was something they didn't even dare to think about. They didn't have to worry about food and drink, and there was no one to restrict them. They also had the money Shi Xiaotian gave them to spend. Although they couldn't normally appear in the general's mansion, they would climb over the wall and stroll around the capital when they were free. The three of them did not dare to neglect the task that Yu Qianzhou had entrusted them with. The purpose of their stroll was to find people with spirit roots for cultivation. Shi Xiaotian looked at the group of people in the rear garden and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of people did Ling Feng and the others bring here? Most of them looked like beggars, or they looked like they were in dire straits. Some of them had eaten their fill and were squatting in the shade of a tree, scratching lice. On the wall of the small courtyard, Ling Feng and the others sat side by side, while Shi Xiaotian stood on it. The four of them looked at the group of people in the garden. Shi Xiaotian smiled bitterly and said, "Ling Feng, did you bring all the beggars in the capital here?" Beizi looked up at him and smiled. "If the three of us really brought all the beggars in the capital here, even 10 of your general's mansions wouldn't be able to accommodate them, let alone this garden. We also want to bring some decent people for boss, but boss already told us to keep a low profile. If we brought so many ordinary people here, I'm afraid that the government would have long been alerted and people would have noticed. Look at these beggars and vagrants, they don't have families and they're all alone. Without them no one in the capital would know." Shi Xiaotian waved his finger and said, "But look, why did you bring even old men here? What does boss want them for? It's good. At least they won't starve to death on the streets." It was rare for Xian Ping to say such a long sentence. Ling Feng nodded and said, "Boss said that as long as they don't belong to any sect and have spiritual roots, regardless of age, the more the better." Let's wait for the boss to get here first." Shi Xiaotian shook his head and raised a small silver ball in his hand. He asked doubtfully, "I just used my divine sense to check inside and found that it's empty. Can this really summon boss?" "It should be possible. Otherwise boss wouldn't have given this to us for no reason," Ling Feng said. Shi Xiaotian looked at the silver ball in his hand and smiled bitterly. "I hope boss can take them away as soon as possible. Otherwise there will be hundreds of people eating every day." "What? Your Grand General's residence can't even support 100 people?" Yu Qianzhou suddenly appeared on top of the wall and laughed. "Boss." The few of them turned around and exclaimed in surprise. After Shi Xiaotian's joy he smiled awkwardly and said, "Boss, that's not what I meant. It's just that my father is about to return to the imperial court. I'm afraid it will arouse my father's suspicion. I don't know how to explain it to him." Yu Qianzhou looked at the hundreds of people and nodded slightly. They were all people with spiritual roots. He didn't expect Ling Feng and the other two to be able to gather so many people in such a short period of time. However, he was stunned when he saw a few old people among them. "Let's talk inside." Yu Qianzhou directly entered the courtyard from the top of the wall. After the four of them entered the main hall, Yu Qianzhou sat on a chair in the main hall and asked curiously, "The pillar of the state general has been fighting at the borders for many years. Why is he suddenly returning to the imperial court?" Shi Xiaotian smiled and said, "It's nothing. The Pingwu general has 2 beautiful daughters. The eldest is going to marry the current crown prince, and the second is going to marry the eldest son of the Weigua general. My father, the Pingwu general, and the Weigua general are the 3 great generals of the empire. Maybe it's because of this that my father has to come personally to congratulate them. An important official with an important official, and an important official with the crown prince?" Yu Qianzhou's brows twitched. He seemed to feel that something wasn't right. He frowned and said, "Shaun, among the 3 great generals of the empire, who has the greatest military power? It's not a matter of who has the greatest military power. The 3 great generals control 6 million soldiers and horses, and there isn't much of a difference in power. If we're talking about military power, I'm afraid it's still my father," Shi Xiaotian said with a hint of pride. "Why?" Yu Qianzhou asked. Shi Xiaotian raised his hand and gestured. "The south of the Wuxia Empire is a barren land that is rarely visited by humans. In the words of our cultivation world, it's called the demonic domain. The east side, Linhai, has always been guarded by the troops of the Weigua general. The Pingwu general's troops are mainly guarding the capital region as well as the northern border. My father, the pillar of the state general, is guarding the west. The east side Linhai has no neighbors. The south is barren, and although it's dangerous, there are no wars. Although there's a big country in the north, they're located in a bitter cold land. In terms of strength, they can't compare to our empire. Only the west that my father guards is not only vast, but it's also connected to the 6 countries. Ever since our empire was founded, the 6 countries have never stopped having conflicts, big or small. Think about it, boss. For so many years, the troops in the east, south, and north have been preparing for war all year round. On the other hand, the west that my father guards is always preparing for war. Therefore, among the 3 great generals of the empire, my father's troops are the strongest. Oh, so that's how it is. Xianxia had always been in the cultivation world, so he really didn't know much about these things. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "Then what about the defense of the west when your father returns to the capital? Isn't he worried at all?" Boss, you don't know. Sure, Xiaotian laughed. Last year, the 6 countries attacked our empire together, instantly angering my father. My father immediately issued a death order. With a single command, his 2 million troops split into 6 groups and defeated the 6 countries one by one, causing them to suffer great losses. In the end, the 6 countries sued for peace. At the beginning of this year, they signed an inviolable treaty with our Wuxia empire. That's why my father can return to the capital with peace of mind. As for the defense of the West, my father has already handed it over to my second brother. Second brother has grown up under my father's guidance. I believe that it won't be a problem for him to guard the West. Oh, that means that there's no war in the West for now? Xianxia asked. Sure, Xiaotian laughed. The 6 countries have suffered great losses. Even if they want to cause trouble, it'll be impossible for them to do so in the next decade or so. Seeing the proud look on Sure Xiaotian's face, Xianxia didn't ask him anything else. However, in his heart he was grumbling. There was no war at the border, but the Sure family controlled the strongest troops of the Wuxia Empire. A single army was able to defeat the armies of the 6 countries at the same time. One could imagine the battle prowess of this army. Some people probably couldn't sit still anymore. Look, they even brought up the matter of an alliance marriage. Chapter 217. Ling Feng walked over and said, "Boss, I, Beizi and Xianping found the people in the garden. Although they don't have much aptitude, they still have some spiritual roots. I wonder if they can be used?" Xianxia came back to his senses and smiled. It's fine as long as they have spiritual roots. How can there be so many people with good aptitude? Those with good aptitude have already been taken away by the major sections. You guys won't even have the chance to find them. But why did you bring the old man here? Sure Xiaotian glanced at the 3 of them and laughed in his heart. Ling Feng was startled and said, "Boss, didn't you say it's better to have more people regardless of age?" Did I say that? Xianxia was stunned and immediately came to a realization. Oh, I think I did say that before. Forget it, it's better than nothing. We can bring them back to cultivate and they'll be stronger than ordinary people. With so many people, we'll be worried about our food supply. It's better to bring them back and not do anything else. We can be self-sufficient. By the way, little Tian, when you have time, help me gather some grains and seeds of all kinds of fruits and vegetables. I have great use for them. The 3 of them didn't know what he was going to do. Sure Xiaotian nodded and agreed. Xianxia instructed again. Ling Feng, Beizi and Xianping, continue to search for people with spiritual roots. I'll still say it. I'll take as many as you can regardless of age. It doesn't matter if your aptitude is lacking, I have a way to solve it. But remember, keep a low profile and don't let the other sects find out. I've been chased out of supporting Immortal's island. Many people want to kill me. This general's residence is my stronghold now. Don't let it be exposed." The 3 of them looked at each other and Sure Xiaoan asked in surprise, "Why were you chased out of supporting Immortal's island?" "My ass." Xianxia stood up and patted Sure Xiaotian's shoulder. He smiled and said, "Xiaoan, I've taken revenge for you and Ong Kuang-tsung. The head of Ong Kuang-tsung, Lu Chongqing, and his grandson Lu Xingguang were both killed by me." They were shocked again. Sure Xiaotian swallowed his saliva and said, "Boss, you're not lying to me, right? You killed sect master Ong Kuang-tsung? How is this possible? Damn it. Do I look like a liar to you? Yu Qianzhou sighed and said, AI. If I didn't kill him, would I have been expelled from the supporting Immortal Island? Sigh. The days of having someone to back him up were over. From now on he would have to rely on himself. Everyone keep a low profile. They were completely speechless, but they still didn't quite believe it. How could the Righteous Path's 6th-ranked sect leader Ong Kwang-tsung be killed so easily? It's good to be expelled from the sect. In the future I can come here whenever I want. Oh right, Xian, get me a set of ordinary clothes. I can't wear the supporting Immortal Island's clothes anymore. I'll definitely get into trouble if I stroll around the capital. Yu Qianzhou said. Sure, Xiaotian's eyes lit up. From Yu Qianzhou's words he could tell that Yu Qianzhou was going to be here often. He immediately agreed happily and went out to find clothes for Yu Qianzhou. Ling Feng and the other two were also overjoyed. As for Yu Qianzhou, he flashed into the garden and stored the 100 or so people in the garden into Utopia. After giving some instructions to Guan Yu, Shi Xiaotian ran over excitedly with a set of clothes. He said, Boss, try this set of clothes to see if it suits you. This is my second brother's clothes. His figure seems to be about the same as yours. Yu Qianzhou took a look and saw that the embroidered clothes, jade belt and thick-soled boots were all prepared. He threw them back and snappily said, I just told you to keep a low profile. Why did you give me these clothes? Are you afraid that others won't notice me? He waved his hand and said, Just give me the clothes of your general residence's servants. Servants' clothes are for you to wear? Shi Xiaotian was stunned. Ling Feng and the other two felt a little uncomfortable looking at the silk robes they were wearing. Yu Qianzhou frowned and said, Why are you so long-winded? If I say it's fine, it's fine. Left with no choice, Shi Xiaotian could only run back to get him a set of servants' clothes. When Yu Qianzhou put on a slanted hat and adjusted his brand new black clothes, he instantly revealed a satisfied smile and said, Not bad, not bad. These clothes are really low profile. Xiaotian, from today onwards I'll be your follower. I don't dare, I don't dare. Shi Xiaotian hurriedly waved his hand. He thought, if you become my follower, what if one day you're not happy? Where am I going to find spirit stones and spirit pills? Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, Don't be long-winded. In front of others I'll be your follower. Behind others I'll still be your boss. That's settled. Ling Feng and the other two exchanged glances and said, Xian, find us a set of servants' clothes too. Why? Is it fun to be a servant's follower? Yu Qianzhou glared at them and said, Do you want to go to the capital's 10,000 flower house, to be a pimp? The three looked at each other and didn't dare to say anything. After staying in the capital for so long, the three naturally knew what kind of place 10,000 flower house was. Speaking of 10,000 flower house, I've never been there before. Why don't you take me there now? Yu Qianzhou tidied up the crooked hat on his head and sighed. At this time he had already put away the storage bag and the sword on his back. To him it didn't matter if these things were on display or not. If he wanted to take them out, it would only take a thought. The three looked at each other and didn't know if he was telling the truth or not. Looking at his serious expression, it didn't seem like he was joking. Shi Xiaotian asked tentatively, Boss, you really want to go to 10,000 flower house? Heh. That place is a lively place. Oh, lively? Yu Qianzhou nodded his head seriously and said, I was just saying it casually. Since you want to go as your follower, I naturally have to accompany you. AI. If you want to go, then hurry up. Let's go. Let's go. Don't waste time. The three were completely speechless. Yu Qianzhou pushed Shi Xiaotian out in a hurry. As he walked, he didn't forget to look back and warn the three who followed him. What are you three doing here? Go do what you need to do. Pillar of State General's residence. Yu Qianzhou had lived here for more than a year, so he was very familiar with the place. In the wealthy and powerful mansion, the two of them walked out of the back garden one after another. The servants who passed by saluted when they saw Shi Xiaotian, but when they saw the servant in new clothes behind him, they all felt that he was very unfamiliar. They all secretly muttered, Why haven't I seen the third young master's servant before? Shi Xiaotian walked confidently in front, while Yu Qianzhou followed behind with his hands behind his back. His aura wasn't any weaker than the former's, but it seemed that his awareness as a servant was a little lacking. When the two of them were about to pass the main hall, a beautiful woman walked out. The two women on her left and right were also quite good-looking. Behind them was a group of servant girls. Xianxia slowed down and said in a low voice, "You know my mother. The two beside her are my eldest sister-in-law and second sister-in-law. They married a few years ago, so you haven't seen them before." The two of them inevitably bumped into each other. Xianxia bowed and said, "Mother. Eldest sister-in-law, second sister-in-law." The servants on the other side also bowed to Xianxia. Li Hongyang looked at her son lovingly. Her eyes inadvertently glanced at the servant behind her son and was slightly startled. Not only did this servant not bow to her, he actually stood there with his hands behind his back. Yu Qianzhou looked at her and nodded with a smile. When Li Hongyang saw who it was, she was immediately shocked. When the woman beside her saw Yu Qianzhou, she frowned and said, "Uncle, is this the new retainer? Why isn't he bowing to mother?" She immediately turned around and shouted, "Housekeeper, who brought this servant? Why doesn't he know the most basic manners of servants? Someone come. Bring him to teach him the rules." Chapter 218. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was dumbfounded. Not only him, Li Hongyang and Xiaotian were also dumbfounded. Not far away, a man in his 50s jogged over and repeatedly smiled apologetically at the woman. He shouted at Yu Qianzhou in a low voice, "Still not coming with me, Mr. Yu?" The housekeeper was Shi Shunqing, a retainer of the general's office. He had met Yu Qianzhou many times in the past, so he was familiar with him. He more or less knew what kind of person Yu Qianzhou was. When he saw Yu Qianzhou's face clearly, he was dumbfounded. Close to 10 years had passed and his own appearance had already aged. However, Yu Qianzhou still looked the same, just that his appearance had become more mature. He naturally recognized him with a single glance, and was immediately at a loss as to what to do. "Shunqing, this has nothing to do with you. Take all the servants away. I haven't seen my wife for many years, so we have something to talk about." Yu Qianzhou came back to his senses and smiled. He ordered the housekeeper to leave. Shi Shunqing nodded repeatedly. After getting Li Hongyang's permission, he took the group of servants away. Seeing that the housekeeper didn't listen to her, the woman was a little annoyed. She glared at him and said, "Does the general's office have any rules? Wansher, don't be rude." Li Hongyang stopped her. The other woman next to her quietly watched everything that happened just now. The servant in front of her was obviously not simple. How could a normal person order the housekeeper of the general's office? "Mother, these servants are getting more and more unruly. If you don't teach them a lesson, they will bully their master in the future. Mother is kind, so you can't be cruel. Why don't you let your wife discipline them instead?" The woman seemed to have lost a nerve in her head and was still chattering. The other woman had already pulled her a few times, but she still didn't notice. "Shut up." Li Hongyang also scolded her wife. In her impression, Yu Qianzhou was like a god. Back then, he just casually drew a path and trapped her eldest son for a few days. How could she offend him? "Damn it. If you continue to nag, I'll sell you to Africa." Yu Qianzhou was speechless when he met such a woman. He pointed at the woman's pretty face and asked Xian, "Xian, is this your sister-in-law? Is it Shi Yotian's wife or Shi Yintian's?" Shi Xiaotian looked at him with a wry smile and thought to himself, "If you don't wear this servant's clothes, how could you have caused such trouble?" Li Hongyang took over the conversation and introduced awkwardly, "Mr. Please don't be offended. This is Bao Wanshi, the wife of my eldest son Yutian, and this is Situ Hui, the wife of my second son Yintian." Bao Wanshi. Yu Qianzhou sized her up and laughed coldly. "She doesn't live up to her name. Why did Yutian choose such a shrew? In my opinion, he should just divorce her." His words were not polite at all. The people at the side were speechless. Shi Xiaotian really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bao Wanshi was so angry that her face turned pale. She said with a trembling voice, You, wah." She was so angry that she cried. Yu Qianzhou didn't have a good impression of shrewd-like women. What he said just now was to anger her. Seeing that she was crying, he immediately became interested in watching a good show. He jokingly said, "Cry, continue to cry. It's too soft, louder." Bao Wanshi did as he said and began to cry loudly. Her voice was really sharp and she even made a lot of body movements. Situ Hui, who was at the side, tried to comfort her, but it was useless. Li Hongyang felt a headache coming on. Shi Shaoan quickly pulled Yu Qianzhou back and said, Boss, I'm begging you. Please be lenient with your words. She's my sister-in-law after all. Just give me some face, okay? Who made my wife cry? A voice that pretended to be angry was heard with a hint of laughter. Xianxia turned to look. A person walked out from the entrance. He wore a scholar's hat and a vermilion official's robe. Who else could it be but the Shi family's boss, Shi Yutong? However, he seemed much more mature than before, especially with the two small tufts of beard on his mouth. Wow. Bao Wanshi acted as if she saw her savior. She wiped her tears and rushed into Shi Yotian's arms. She began to complain about all her grievances. There's such an evil servant. Wanshi, don't cry. I'll teach him a lesson for you. Shi Yuan let go of his wife and walked over with large strides. Interesting. Xianxia couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh. He said, Shi Yuan, we haven't seen each other for so many years. I didn't think you'd become a flower protector. I'd like to see how you'll teach me a lesson. How dare you? After Shi Yutian saw the person's face clearly, the words he was about to shout got stuck in his throat. His face turned red. When he came to his senses, he hurriedly lifted the hem of his official robe and ran over to pay his respects. Yutian greets Mr. I haven't seen Mr. for many years. You've been well. No matter what their relationship was like in the past, meeting old friends was always a happy thing. Xianxia supported him and said with a smile, I don't live as well as you do. Hugging your wife and flirting in public. What a simple life. Mister, you must be joking. Yutian only covets some romantic relationships. How can it compare to Mr.'s celestial life? After all these years, Mr. is still as elegant as ever. Yutian really envies you. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Back then he painstakingly pursued the path of cultivation. In the end, the path was ethereal and he woke up from his dream. He finally gave up and settled down to marry a wife and focus on his career. However, he couldn't help but have a cultivation complex in his heart. He sighed to himself. His third wife was the one he was envious of. He often wanted to chat with his third wife, but it was difficult to see her leave the forbidden area of the back garden. At this moment, Bao Wanshi was no longer crying. She was looking at her husband with her mouth wide open. No matter how stupid she was, she could sense that the servant in front of her was not ordinary. Shi Yutian waved at her and said, Wanshi, come and greet Mr. Bao Wanshi didn't know where to put her hands. She walked over gracefully and saluted with a flushed face. Bao Wanshi greets Mr. I was reckless and offended Mr. just now. Please forgive me, Mr. Hui, who was at the side, was very obedient. She didn't need to be reminded and came over to Bao. Hui greets Mr. Humph. Xianxia snorted coldly at Bao Wanshi and ignored her. Instead, he raised his hand at Hui, indicating that she didn't have to be so polite. He smiled and said, Are you Yin Tian's wife? I'm old acquaintances with your husband. Wife? Husband? This Mr.'s words were a little rude. Hui muttered to herself, but she nodded with a smile and retreated to the side. Shi Yutian saw that Xianxia was ignoring his wife's apology. He immediately gave his third brother a look, asking him to plead for leniency. Shi Xiaotian understood and walked over to pull Xianxia. He smiled and said, Boss, my sister-in-law actually has a good heart. She's just a little outspoken. Don't bother with her. That's right, that's right. Shi Yutian walked over and said, Yutian apologizes to Mr. on my wife's behalf. I hope that Mr. will forgive my wife this time for my third brother's sake. Actually, Xianxia wouldn't really bother with an ordinary person like her. However, women sometimes relied on their status and didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. In order to be less long-winded in the future, he couldn't help but scare her a little. He immediately pointed his finger and shouted, Bao Wanshi, I'll spare your life this time for the sake of the Shi brothers. If you dare to do this again, I'll definitely take your head. When that time comes, it'll be useless no matter who pleads for mercy. Hurry up and thank Mr. Shi Yutian tugged at his wife. Bao Wanshi felt very wronged. How could she be treated worse than an outsider in her own home? However, she still thanked him honestly. This matter was settled just like that. Bless the heavens. Xianxia patted his shoulder and sighed. Xiaotian and I are going to Wanhua brothel. Do you want to join us? Shi Xiaotian almost vomited blood. He looked at his mother who was glaring at him guiltily. Si Tuhui's face was already red. Bao Wansher's eyes were wide open. Shi Yutian kept smiling foolishly at Yu Qianzhou. This question was very difficult to answer. In fact, he really wanted to go out with Yu Qianzhou. It was not for the fans of Wanhua brothel but purely for Yu Qianzhou. However, his wife, mother and sister-in-law were all at the side. How was he supposed to answer? Yu Qianzhou joked, "Are you going or not? Why are you smiling foolishly? Give me an answer." Shi Xiaotian's expression twitched. "Boss, you just want to see the world in chaos. You're not allowed to go." Bao Wansher opened her arms and stood in front of Shi Yutian. She glared at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Even if you kill me, I won't let him go to that place with you." I didn't know that she was a feminist. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and said, "Yun, since your wife doesn't want you to go, then forget it. Fine, let's go." With that said, he walked straight out. Shi Xiaotian lowered his head and followed behind as if he was looking for ants. "Hey, Mr. Wait." Shi Yudong was a little anxious. "If you dare to go, I'll fight it out with you." Bao Wansher jumped onto Shi Yutian and hugged him tightly. She didn't care about her image anymore. Not far away, Yu Qianzhou's laughter could be heard. Si Tuhui's eyes revealed a trace of curiosity. Who is this person? Chapter 219. The speed at which news spread in the cultivation world was very fast. It was much faster than the speed at which a horse could run or a pigeon could carry a message. Once the news of Yu Qianzhou being expelled from the supporting Immortals Island was released, it caused a huge uproar. Of course, an ordinary core formation disciple would not be able to cause such a huge uproar. The main reason was that the things he did had a huge impact. 100 Flowers Valley beat up the grandson of Sect Master Ong Kwang-tsung, and Hat Island beat up the son of Deluo Sect Master. This guy seemed to be targeting those with status. Ong Kwang-tsung announced that Sect Master Ong Kwang-tsung and his grandson had been killed by Yu Qianzhou. Ong Kwang-tsung offered a reward of 1 million high-grade spirit stones to anyone who could provide information about Yu Qianzhou. The reward for taking Yu Qianzhou's head was 5 million high-grade spirit stones, and the reward for capturing Yu Qianzhou alive was 10 million high-grade spirit stones. As soon as the news of the Azure Light sect was released, the entire cultivation world was boiling. A mere core formation disciple killed Sect Master Ong Kwang-tsung? It was hard to believe. However, for those from the small sects, 1 million, 5 million or even 10 million upper spiritual stones were tempting enough for them. Now that Yu Qianzhou didn't have the support of supporting Immortal Island, he was just a core formation cultivator. He was no different from a lowly vagrant cultivator. There was nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, they sent out their disciples to investigate. Even if they did not expect to earn 10 million high-grade spirit stones, it would still be good if they could earn 1 million. Those poor rogue cultivators tried their luck everywhere. However, there was a rumor that Ong Kwang-tsung's ancestor Qing Nu failed to capture Yu Qianzhou when he confronted Yu Qianzhou. Instead, he allowed Yu Qianzhou to escape unscathed. However, after thinking about it, everyone understood that this was pure nonsense. How could a late-stage transcending tribulation cultivator fail to capture a core formation cultivator? It was a joke and a rumor. Under Ong Kwang-tsung's request, the entire Cultivation Alliance began to operate. All the righteous sects that joined the Cultivation Alliance would search for Yu Qianzhou in the cultivation world. If necessary, they could kill him on the spot. Deluo sect was especially supportive of this. At this moment, in the Wu clan's ancestral hall of the 4 major clans, the clan heads of the 4 major clans gathered together at the fastest speed. After receiving the news from Wu Sihai, the 4 clan heads weren't surprised that Yu Qianzhou was expelled from Fuxian Island. After the 4 clan heads had a discussion, they issued a secret order to the disciples of the 4 major clans to search for Yu Qianzhou in secret. Once they found him, they were to protect him at all costs until he returned to the 4 major clans. Once this news was out, the evil Dao was the happiest. The righteous sects actually had such an unconventional traitor. Moreover, he was a traitor of Fuxian Island. Moreover, he was such a famous traitor. If he could join the evil Dao, it would be a huge blow to the reputation of the righteous sections. Why wouldn't they do it? As a result, the entire evil Dao alliance began to operate rapidly. All the evil Dao sects had a common understanding that they would protect Yu Qianzhou at all costs when necessary. If any of the sects suffered any losses because of this matter, all the sects would compensate them together. In short, they must not let the righteous sects succeed. 10,000 demons. Zhou Xian clamored in high spirits as he personally commanded this leap operation. In an instant, both the righteous and the evil Dao took action. Xianxia had completely disrupted the entire cultivation world. No one knew if the righteous sects would succeed or if the evil Dao would be rampant. In the bustling streets of the Wuxia Empire, Xianxia was wearing black clothes and a small hat. He was dressed like a servant and was completely unaware of everything that happened in the cultivation world because of him. He was leisurely strolling behind Zhou Xian. When he saw the people and carriages passing by and people looking at him with strange eyes, Xianxia immediately restrained himself. Not to mention anything else, the fact that he was misunderstood by Bao Wanshi at the general's mansion meant that he was not good enough at acting as a servant. Thus he found a passerby as a comparison. He put down his hands behind his back and straightened his chest. He followed behind Zhou Xian with a dejected look. "Boss." Zhou Xian turned around and was stunned. Why did his boss look like a thief? He said in a daze, "Are we really going to Wanhua Lu? Faster, thief. Have you ever seen a young master call a servant boss? Please act more properly and call me Little Qian." Xianxia rolled his eyes. "Little Qian, are we really going to Wanhua Lu?" Zhou Xian said a little unnaturally. "Young master, if you say so, we will go." Xianxia put on a servant's smile and thought, Wanhua Lu is so famous in the capital. I wonder what the difference is between the brothels of the ancient times and the ones in my previous life. I wasn't in the mood before, but now that I'm interested, I'll be letting myself down if I don't take a look. When did I say I wanted to go? It seems like you're the one who said you wanted to go. Zhou Xian was speechless. He originally wanted to get a carriage, but he didn't know why Xianxia rejected it and insisted on walking. Wanhua Lu should be considered as the #1 brothel in the Wuxia Empire. There were branches in all the bigger cities in the empire. To be able to obtain the title of Wanhua and make so many men flock to it like ducks and spend money like water, it definitely had its own unique points. Xianxia came because of this point. This was the #1 brothel in the world. Compared to the #1 brothel in the world, Fuxian Island, it seemed like more people knew about the former than the latter. The night was about to turn dark. On a small street that wasn't the main street, the moment one entered the street, one could smell the fragrance of pink powder. This small street was abnormally bustling with people walking to and fro, rubbing shoulders with each other. It was a street where one could eat, drink, and be merry. This was all thanks to the #1 brothel in the world, Wanhua Lu. When the two walked in, Xianxia exclaimed in admiration that this was a first-rate place to spend money. Zhou Xiaotian's face also became lively. Suddenly, there was a crowd of people rushing towards the largest building in the middle of the street. That building was decorated with colorful makeup, and it was even more beautiful than a bride's. The fragrance of pink powder was coming from that building. Needless to say, this was definitely Wanhua Lu. The two of them were swept by the crowd. Zhou Xiaotian turned his head and looked at the crowded carriages on the street. He was secretly glad that he didn't take a carriage. Xianxia patted the shoulder of a person beside him and asked, "Brother, why is it so lively here? Is Wanhua Lu like this every day?" That person was trying his best to squeeze forward. Hearing this, he looked at Xianxia with surprise and said, "One look and I know it's your first time here. Today is the day that the #1 courtesan of Wanhua Lu will appear. Normally you won't be able to see it. It only happens once a month. If you're lucky, you might be able to see it." After saying this, he ignored him and continued to squeeze forward. The #1 courtesan of the world's #1 courtesan? How beautiful would she be? Xianxia was instantly interested. He secretly circulated his true essence, trying to push through the crowd. At this moment, a shout came from the street. "All of you, get out of my way." The crowd turned around and saw an officer riding a large horse leading a large group of soldiers. They began to part the crowd and cut in. The commoners didn't dare to block their way, and the crowd began to squeeze to the sides again. The entrance of the 10,000 flower house was immediately surrounded by a group of soldiers wielding shining long sabers. Although there were soldiers guarding the entrance, the carriages on the street still couldn't enter. Hence, there were more soldiers protecting a group of people who got off the carriages and walked towards Wanhua Lu. Looking at the clothes of these people, they were probably nobles. Seeing these people easily pass through the crowd with their heads held high, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to throw a few bricks at them, but after thinking about it he held back. The two of them squeezed into the crowd and waited for more than 2 hours. After the soldiers had probably escorted hundreds of nobles in, they finally retreated and guarded the entrance of Wanhua Lu, not letting random people in. Then a few rich people who were escorted by their servants were allowed in after negotiating with the tortoise bus at the entrance. As for the people squeezing on the street, they were basically commoners or people who weren't rich or powerful, so they were naturally prevented from entering. They could only watch from the outside. Damn it! The #1 courtesan of the world's #1 courtesan. This daddy here hangs out with the third young master of the National Pillar General's estate, who holds great military power, but I can't even enter a brothel. Damn it! Yu Qianqiu was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. He glared at Zhou Xian, who was shaking his head and smiling bitterly. He was very unhappy. A trace of ruthlessness flashed across his face. He raised his hand and shouted, "The third young master of the National Pillar General's estate has arrived." Chapter 220. His voice was loud and clear. The moment the name Pillar of the State General was announced, it immediately produced a miraculous effect. The clamoring crowd immediately quietened down. Schwa! Everyone turned their heads to look in one direction. Becoming the center of attention, Shi Xiaotian was momentarily stunned. He never expected Yu Qianqiu to make such a move. At the entrance of the 1,000-flower brothel, the military officer holding the saber by his waist looked over in shock. Yu Qianqiu, who was dressed as a house servant, was naturally unable to attract his attention. Seeing Shi Xiaotian in his luxurious robes, he was a little shocked. As the third young master of the Pillar of the State General's residence, although Shi Xiaotian rarely appeared in public, he had still seen him on a few occasions. As a soldier, the Pillar of the State General who had been fighting at the western borders for many years was undoubtedly the idol of the entire Wuxia Empire. He also had a very high prestige among the citizens of the empire. Especially last year when the general's 2 million soldiers split into 6 groups and defeated the 6 countries, forcing the 6 countries to sign an armistice, it pushed the reputation of the Pillar of the State General to the peak. In their hearts, the Pillar of the State General was the guardian of the Wuxia Empire. Out of the way! The military officer shouted excitedly. The citizens also had a look of surprise on their faces as they squeezed to the side, afraid to block Shi Xiaotian's path. The military officer waved his hand, and the soldiers guarding the 1,000-flower brothel immediately split into 2 groups, rushing into the path that the citizens had vacated. They lined up neatly on both sides of the path. The military officer strode towards Shi Xiaotian and waved his hand to open his cloak. Holding the saber in his hand, he knelt down on one knee and said in a clear voice, "This general is the City Guard Patrol Commander Yuan Fei. Greetings, third young master." Greetings, third young master. The 2 rows of guards and the guards of the 1,000-flower brothel all knelt down in unison. It was unknown which citizen knelt down first, but the citizens of the entire street all knelt down with difficulty. Because it was simply too crowded, they all shouted, "This humble citizen greets third young master. This humble citizen greets third young master." Their shouts rang out one after another, and it was clear that they were all heartfelt respect. Shi Xiaotian was a little embarrassed. Coming to a brothel in the name of the National Pillar General's residence was not something to be proud of. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect the Pillar of the State General to have such high prestige among the soldiers and citizens. He couldn't help but feel regret for his actions earlier. To have caused the citizens to love the Pillar of the State General in such a manner. His conscience really couldn't be justified. After all, he was a soldier in his previous life. To be able to command such respect from the citizens, it was impossible to do so without experiencing 1,000 miles of bloodshed. Yu Qianqiu was truly ashamed to have tarnished the reputation of a general like this. The nobles and the rich who had entered the 10,000-flower house were also shocked by the continuous shouts outside. Third young master? Which family's third young master had come to cause such a big commotion? They sent their servants to the door to inquire. All the soldiers and civilians on the street knelt down. Only the 2 young men dressed as a master and a servant stood out, making the servants speechless. At this moment Xiu Xiaotian couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yu Qianqiu with a little complaint. The latter smiled awkwardly. Xiu Xiaoan circulated his true yuan and said loudly, "My fellow citizens, please get up. I Xiu Xiaoan am not worthy of such a big greeting." His voice surged through the entire street, drowning out everyone's greetings. The soldiers and commoners were shocked. What a loud voice! As expected of the son of the national pillar general. Like father like son. Everyone thanked him and said, "Thank you, third young master." They got up with difficulty. "Commander Yuan, please get up." Xiu Xiaotian reached out to help Yuan Fei up. When the latter heard the former's loud voice and saw him coming to help him up, his competitive spirit was secretly aroused. He wanted to see if he had real skills or was just using his voice to scare people. Who knew that he didn't even have the strength to resist and was lifted up just like that. Yuan Fei couldn't help but be shocked. What great strength! His gaze swept past the sword hanging on Xiu Xiaotian's waist. No wonder he was brought up in such a manner. Seeing their commander stand up, the soldiers also stood up. Yuan Fei waved his hand and said, "Third young master, please." "You're welcome." Xiu Xiaotian cupped his hands and walked forward under Yuan Fei's lead. Yu Qianqiu followed behind dejectedly. Stepping into the myriad flower house, Yuan Fei stayed outside to continue guarding while the pimp led the master and servant in. The lanterns were lit and the myriad flower house was filled with guests. Alluring women were walking around with plates of fruits, wine and all kinds of delicacies. Hearing that the third young master of the national pillar general's residence had arrived, the nobles who were already seated gathered downstairs to greet him. In terms of status and rank, there was no need to greet him. Many of the nobles had a higher rank than the national pillar general. However, he was the one who held the strongest military power in the empire. He was someone who could make the entire Wuxia empire tremble with a stomp of his foot. He was much stronger than those nobles who only had titles in name only. Xiu Xiaotian gracefully greeted the crowd. One moment it was that little prince, the next moment it was this little prince. Xiu Xiaotian handled the situation with ease. Yu Qianqiu nodded to himself. As expected of someone from the upper class. Today he had finally witnessed the power of the national pillar general's residence. He had a new plan in mind. They were in an enclosure with a big performance stage in the middle. There were 2 levels of seats for spectators. The upper level was an open single room, while the lower level was a circle of single-table banquets. This should be the place where the courtesan Belle would sing and dance tonight to celebrate peace and prosperity. Xiu Xiaotian arrived late. The single room upstairs had already been occupied. However, there was no need to worry. Naturally, there were people who knew their place and left one for him. The 2 of them were in a single room on the 2nd floor, one sitting and one standing. The one standing behind Xiu Xiaotian was of course Yu Qianqiu. A servant couldn't possibly sit with his master in public, could he? Wan Hualu had arranged for some prostitutes to come over. However, Yu Qianqiu felt that they were too unattractive. He found an excuse that the third young master didn't want to be disturbed and chased them out. He was used to seeing beauties in the cultivation world. Naturally, he wasn't interested in the so-called beauties here. If it wasn't for the fact that he still wanted to see the courtesan that everyone was fighting for, he might have turned around and left. Soon the performance on the central stage began. For a moment the sound of zither, flute and drums rang out. More than a dozen graceful women danced gracefully, causing the crowd to cheer. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that they were going to do a striptease or something. Who knew that after wandering around for a long time, there wasn't anything interesting at all. One group after another went down and another group changed into different styles. They didn't have the awareness of a brothel at all. He really didn't understand why those princes and nobles were cheering. Yu Qianqiu wished that he could throw a grenade down and let those women who were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws quickly get off the stage. He wanted that courtesan to come up and take a look as soon as possible. If she didn't look good, then they should leave as soon as possible to avoid wasting time. This brothel was too boring. The music played by those musicians didn't have any passion at all. When it fell into his ears, it was like a lullaby. It made him sleepy and yawn repeatedly. After an unknown amount of time, just as he was in a semi-conscious state, the commotion around him woke him up. The lonely and light sound of the zither entered his ears, and it was quite refreshing. When he looked again, the surrounding princes and nobles were all leaning against the railings to watch. The courtesan is coming out. Xianxia said softly. He also walked to the railings to watch. Yu Qianchou's eyes lit up. He had been waiting for the stars and the moon. Finally it was here. He also followed. In the depths of the lanterns, a figure dressed in a light gauze and thin red palace dress leisurely walked over. A long white jade hairpin was inserted into her jet black hair bun. The two ends of the hairpin were pulled up by a red veil that covered her face. Her pretty face was faintly discernible. It was hard to see clearly, but it was exceptionally alluring. Her white and tender lily-white hands were hugging a plain zither. One side of her ample chest was lightly pressed against it, making the other side even more abruptly perky. The red veil covered her perky buttocks, trying to cover her slender jade legs. However, the boundless spring scenery was always inadvertently revealed when her jade legs strode forward. The beauty dressed in red lightly walked onto the stage. She put down the jade zither on the table that had already been set up by someone. She nodded slightly to the surrounding people and then sat down peacefully. The red veil on both sides of her buttocks was quietly pulled open, revealing her white and tender thighs. Good. Someone clapped and shouted. Immediately it caused a loud commotion. Everyone agreed one after another. Yu Qianchou finally became spirited. He clapped with all his might. Damn it. He finally saw someone who was pleasing to the eye. Although he couldn't see her face clearly just based on her figure alone, it was already top-notch. The single room for the two of them was in a good position. The courtesan happened to be facing the two of them so they could slowly admire her. 10 jade-like fingers pressed down on the strings of the zither, gently evoking a quiet and exquisite sound. The surroundings immediately quietened down. Yu Qianchou nodded. At first he sounded a little sad, but it was still a little interesting. At least he was able to continue listening. The sound of the zither reverberated faintly. The face under the red veil suddenly sang softly, "I am a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation, 1,000 years of loneliness. Ah." The smile on Yu Qianchou's face instantly froze. Then it started to twitch. Chapter 221. It was a completely different tune from the Wuxia Empire, with a different style and singing style. However, it was undeniable that it was indeed pleasant to the ears. It was completely different from the current high-pitched tunes that were popular. It was simple and mellow yet moving. Even those ignorant and incompetent hedonistic sons could immediately understand the meaning behind it. Gradually, the image of a white fox trapped in love for 1,000 years appeared in everyone's mind. White fox. Zhou Xian's face was also filled with shock. How did this popular tune in the cultivation world spread to the myriad flower house in the secular world? Moreover, the person who composed this tune was right beside him. The two of them looked at each other, completely losing the mood to look at beauties. They looked at the Huakue again. Although they couldn't be sure, they had a feeling that the other party was sizing them up intentionally or unintentionally. This Huakue was probably not simple. The surrounding nobles had previously been drooling over the Huakue's beauty, but now they were completely immersed in the Huakue's singing. Even after the song ended, they still couldn't extricate themselves. After a long time, their exclamations turned into cheers. They all felt that this trip was not in vain, so they rewarded the Huakue with gold and silver ingots. However, the Huakue seemed to be indifferent to the praises and rewards of the crowd. Yu Qianchou and Zhou Xian were no longer in the mood to stay. They turned around and were about to leave quietly. Suddenly, a coquettish voice transmitted into Yu Qianchou's ears. "I didn't expect that the abandoned disciple of Fuxian Island that the entire Cultivation Alliance is looking for would actually be involved with the pillar of the state generals." Yu Qianchou stopped in his tracks and suddenly turned to look at the Huakue downstairs. Who else could it be if not her who was able to sing the White Fox? The other party could actually transmit a voice. It was clear that her cultivation was above the tribulation stage. No wonder he couldn't tell. Who was this person? Unfortunately, his cultivation was not at the stage where he could transmit a voice. He couldn't question her in public, could he? He could only reveal a stern and questioning gaze. Seeing his reaction, Zhou Xian also stopped. He didn't know what he was going to do. Yo. The third son of the National Pillar General was actually an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. He. Yu Qianchou, you've really found a good hiding place. Yu Qianzhou heard Hua Kuei's laughter again. Don't look at me like that. You want to know who I am? Then let's meet at the top of the highest mountain in the western suburbs of the capital. Come quickly. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that the Cultivation Alliance won't find out about the relationship between you and the National Pillar General's residence. Hee hee. After Hua Kuei finished transmitting her voice, she picked up her zither and quietly walked away amidst the cries of pain from the crowd. She only left the crowd with a graceful and extremely alluring back view. Many people beat their chests and stamped their feet, asking everywhere why the Oiran Queen left after just one song. No one could answer. Those who wanted to use force were also stopped by others. Since Myriad Flower Tower was able to establish itself in the Wuxia Empire, they naturally had a powerful background or strength to back them up. They weren't people they could afford to offend just because they wanted to. Yu Qianzhou squinted his eyes as he watched Hua Kuei leave. He whispered into Shi Xiaotian's ear, I have something to attend to. I'll be heading out first. You play by yourself. With that he left quietly. Shi Xiaotian looked at the departing Hua Kuei, then at the departing Yu Qianzhou. He sat down thoughtfully. After leaving Myriad Flower Tower, Yu Qianzhou found an empty alley and released a flying sword out of thin air. He stepped on the sword and quickly flew towards the western suburbs. The people of the capital naturally couldn't see it in the dark. Even if they did see a stream of light, they would think it was a dazzling light. The highest mountain in the western suburbs was steep. It should be a place with few people. On the mountain, the chirping of insects could be heard. The silver moonlight covered the mountain peak. The rocks on the mountain peak were exposed and could be considered flat. As the mountain wind blew, a few old pine trees swayed under the moonlight. Yu Qianzhou landed on his sword. He flipped the sword in his hand and carefully looked around. Even if the other party was an expert at the end of the tribulation stage, he was confident that he could escape. It wasn't a big place. Under the moonlight, it was clear that the other party hadn't arrived yet. The terrain at the foot of the mountain was dangerous. In the depths of the forest it seemed a little eerie. Yu Qianzhou looked at the dim lights of the capital. He stood on the mountain peak and welcomed the mountain wind. He held his sword with both hands and quietly waited for the arrival of Myriad Flower Tower's Hua Kuei. Ding ding dong dong. The sound of a zither suddenly sounded behind him. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. He suddenly turned around and his gaze fell on the few old pine trees. A woman wrapped in a red veil sat on the top of the tree and played the zither. Who else could it be other than that Hua Kuei? Damn it. Trying to scare me. Aren't you afraid of pricking your butt while wearing so little? Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice. Who are you? Why did you ask me to come here? How do you know me? Hua Kuei didn't answer. Instead she played the zither and sang, Yesterday was like the flowing river in the east, far away from me. Today my heart is in chaos, how troublesome. Did you ask me to come here just to listen to you play and sing? Yu Qianzhou waved his sword and pointed at her. Hua Kuei was completely focused. It was as if she was deeply immersed in her own song. Only when the song was finished did she open her fingers and press on the zither to stop the lingering sound. She sighed and said, Yu Qianzhou, I heard that the song I played and sang today was composed by you? Crazy. Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice. So what if I composed it? So what if I didn't? Nothing much. On the treetop Hua Kuei's figure flashed and under the moonlight he suddenly appeared beside Yu Qianzhou, leaving behind several afterimages. The latter was startled and he fiercely jumped back. Whoosh! Nearly 100 flying swords suddenly appeared, and they protected him from all directions. Hua Kuei, who was holding the zither, was startled. She didn't see how Yu Qianzhou could produce so many flying swords at once. She also didn't see him carrying a storage bag. She chuckled and said, What are you nervous about? But you do have some skills. No wonder you could kill the sect master of Ongquangsung. I'm a little curious. How could that half-baked Hao Wei teach a disciple like you? That's right, he might have learned it on supporting Immortal Island. But Hao Wei doesn't know how to play the zither or sing. What do you mean by good or bad? I don't know him. Who are you? Why did you ask me to come here? Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice. You don't know Hao Wei? Oh, I get it. You should know the Hao Sansi of Ongquangsung, right? Isn't he your master? Hua Kuei laughed. What does my master have to do with you? Hua Kuei smiled and said, I heard that you offended the sect master of Ong Kwang-tsung because of your master's death. That's why you joined supporting Immortal Island. Yes. You beat up the grandson of the sect master of Ong Kwang-tsung in the Hundred Flowers Valley. Then you beat up the son of the De Luo sect master at Hatter Island. Then you killed Lu Chongqing and his grandson. It looks like you're still brooding over the death of your master Xianxia. I didn't expect Xianxia to have taken in a good disciple. He's always thinking about avenging his master. It's only right for a disciple to avenge his master. There's no need for you to flatter him. I find it strange. You didn't invite me here to have a heart-to-heart talk, did you? Yu Qianzhou sneered. Only right? Hehe. Xianxia has finally done something right in this life, so his death isn't unjust. Hua Kuei giggled again, laughing so hard that his body trembled. Su Qin, who was in her arms, stood on the ground. She lifted an arm and removed the veil that was tied to her hairpin. Her charming face smiled at Yu Qianzhou. So familiar. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He searched his mind and suddenly remembered a person. He couldn't help but exclaim, "You're the 100 Charms enchantress of the Demon Illusion Palace." Chapter 222. Oh. Little brother, you have a good memory. I didn't expect you to remember our first meeting. It's not in vain that I've been paying attention to you all these years. Allure seductress spread her arms and swept her fingers over the strings of the zither. After a string of homophonic notes, she covered her mouth and laughed. Her breasts rippled, and the red muslin wrapped around her swayed with the mountain wind. The color of her lower body was faintly discernible. She was really charming when she smiled. Yu Qianzhou was stunned and thought, amazing. Among all the beauties he knew, he had never seen a woman like Allure seductress. She had the charm of a mature woman to the extreme. No wonder she was called Allure seductress. However, he didn't know whether she was a friend or a foe, so he couldn't be careless. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and said expressionlessly, "Why have you been paying attention to me?" Allure seductress stopped laughing and shook her head. "Are you really confused or just pretending? Don't you know the relationship between me and your master?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered. He had heard the conversation between her and Lu Wanwan in the Spirit Stone Mine. If Hao Wei was really his master Xianxia, then the relationship between her and his master was ambiguous. He might even have to call her his master's wife. However, it seemed too ridiculous. How could a dirty old man like his master pick up such an arrogant girl? Besides, Allure seductress was the master of the enchanted palace. Unless she was a pervert. Allure seductress seemed to have seen through his mind. She didn't wait for his answer and told him a story of the past. At that time, Allure seductress wasn't the master of the enchanted palace yet. When she went down the mountain to gain experience, she happened to meet Hao Wei, who was also going down the mountain to gain experience. At that time he wasn't called Xianxia. One was righteous and the other evil, so they started to fight. However, Hao Wei was only in the early stage of core formation at that time, while Allure seductress was in the middle stage of nascent soul. There was a huge gap between their cultivations. As a result, Allure seductress was not only injured but also captured by Hao Wei. The Allure temptress had always looked down on the hypocrisy of the righteous, so she teased Hao Wei by saying that she wouldn't kill him as long as he was willing to join her phantom palace. However, Hao Wei would rather die than submit. Every time he opened his mouth, he would call her demoness. As a result, he had angered the temptress of 100 Charms. Thus, she tormented him until he was on the verge of death. But even if he was on his last breath, Hao Wei would rather die than submit. He continued to curse and swear loudly. Allure seductress was shocked. She didn't expect that there would be a man who wasn't afraid of death in this world. She had never seen a man like this before. Her attitude gradually changed from disdain to ridicule, then to anger, and then from shock to admiration. Such a man was indeed rare in the cultivation world, and it could be said that she was convinced. Then a dramatic change occurred. Allure seductress beat Hao Wei to death, but in the end she was the one who healed him. Under her careful care, Hao Wei's mood also changed during the healing process. He didn't expect that this seemingly seductive and absurd woman had such a side to her. As a result, there was a problem. When a man and a woman spent a long time together, once they had a good impression of each other, It couldn't be stopped and the two of them developed feelings for each other. To be exact, the two of them fell in love. In the cultivation world, it was absolutely forbidden for righteous and evil to fall in love with each other, especially in the righteous. Hao Wuwei, who had recovered from his injuries, returned to Ong Kwang-tsung uneasily. He didn't dare to mention this matter to his master. However, a lure seductress was a woman who dared to love and hate. This might be the difference between evil and righteous. A lure seductress couldn't bear the pain of lovesickness, so she secretly went to Ong Kwang-tsung to find Hao Wuwei. As a result, Hao Wuwei was scared to death and advised her not to come to Ong Kwang-tsung anymore. His words almost made a lure seductress die of anger. "I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? A man who isn't even afraid of death is afraid of this?" She was so angry that she simply revealed her whereabouts in Ong Kwang-tsung and quickly escaped. Her willfulness didn't cause any trouble for herself, but it caused Hao Wuwei to suffer. When the matter was exposed and he was reprimanded by the sect, Hao Wuwei honestly confessed what had happened and almost lost his life. If it weren't for the fact that his master happened to be the sect master of Ong Kwang-tsung and wanted to protect him, there wouldn't be Xianxia in the future. In fact, back then the sect master of Ong Kwang-tsung thought very highly of this disciple and even wanted to train him to be his successor. However, this matter was completely ruined. The sect master was heartbroken and reprimanded his disciple severely. He also changed his name to Xianxia, which meant that he should think twice before doing anything. In the end, he couldn't avoid the punishment and swore never to have any contact with a lure seductress again. He even made a fuss and faced the wall to reflect on his mistakes for 10 years. After that, a lure seductress was a little regretful, but she held on. In the end, the two of them really didn't see each other for decades. By coincidence, when the two of them met again, a lure seductress couldn't believe her eyes. Hao Wuwei, who was upright and outspoken in the past, had actually become a sloppy old man. She found an opportunity to stop him alone and interrogate him. However, he said that his name was Xianxia and that he didn't know a lure seductress or Hao Wuwei. She mistook him for someone else. After that, he smiled amiably and left. That's right, a lure seductress cultivated a kind of seduction technique which had the effect of retaining one's youth. However, with Hao Wuwei's cultivation, he shouldn't have aged so quickly and become so much older than her. Even if he did age quickly, how could it be so easy for two people who had been in love for so many years to mistake each other? Both of them weren't ordinary people. Moreover, how could she hide the inexplicable sadness that flashed through Hao Wuwei's smiling eyes? After she spent a lot of effort to figure out what had happened to Hao Wuwei, a lure seductress cried bitterly for 3 days and 3 nights. She brought all the misfortune to Hao Wuwei. After that, she begged Ong Kwang-tsung several times, wanting to meet Hao Wuwei. However, how could Ong Kwang-tsung agree to her request of a demon? It was already good enough that he didn't kill her. Therefore, she tried to force her way in several times, but how could a lure seductress break in alone? She almost lost her life in Ong Kwang-tsung's hands. After understanding that one person's strength was too insignificant for Ong Kwang-tsung, a lure seductress made up her mind and concentrated on her cultivation. After another decade, she sat on the position of the palace master of the enchanted palace as she wished. When she finally firmly grasped the entire enchanted palace in her hands and was about to visit Ong Kwang-tsung again, she didn't expect that Hao Wuwei would be killed. A lure seductress felt like she was struck by lightning. Everything she had done all these years was for Hao Wuwei. Who knew that it would end up like this? For a moment, a lure seductress was filled with boundless anger. However, the culprit Daoist sect was not something that her enchanted palace could afford to offend. Therefore, she picked Ong Kwang-tsung to vent her anger first. Later, when Ong Kwang-tsung's spirit stone mine was attacked, Yu Qianchou personally experienced it. After that, enchanted palace was wiped out by Ong Kwang-tsung in retaliation. This was also something that the entire cultivation world knew. This story was a bit too melodramatic. After listening to it, Yu Qianchou was speechless. He didn't know what to say. No wonder Lu Wanwan said that he was Hao Wuwei's disciple. So this was what happened. That old man really couldn't tell. He really didn't expect that there would be such a romantic past. This allure seductress was actually Master's woman. Then wouldn't she really be on the same level as Master's wife? Chapter 223. What? You didn't expect this, right? The allure beauty laughed like a silver bell. I sigh. With a thought, Yu Qianchou's flying swords disappeared, removing his defense. Scratching his head, he walked in front of the allure beauty, smiled bitterly and bowed. Disciple Yu Qian greets ma. For a moment he still found it hard to associate Hao Sansi, that old man, with this charming woman, but the two of them had an affair. He had to accept it even if he didn't want to. From the old man's previous signs, he still had this woman in his heart. Otherwise he wouldn't have given up on himself to that extent. If he didn't accept it, his conscience wouldn't be at ease and the old man wouldn't die in peace. Yo, that's a good boy. The allure beauty obviously liked the word mum. With a charming smile, she walked closer and teasingly hooked his chin with her finger, and even put her arm around his shoulder. That pair of bouncy and plump breasts rubbed against his shoulder from time to time, causing Yu Qianchou to smile bitterly. Was this woman really as infatuated as she said? Sigh. What a stunner. Damn it. It was really irritating. Unfortunately, he wouldn't do that kind of thing even if he was beaten to death. Cough cough. That. Why did you go to a place like 10,000 flower brothel? Yu Qianchou changed the topic and took the opportunity to stand further away. He didn't want to cause a nosebleed in front of Mom. What do you mean I went to a place like 10,000 flower brothel? 10,000 flower brothel originally belonged to the Enchanted Palace. What's so strange about me, the palace master, being in my own territory? The allure beauty laughed. What? Yu Qianchou was stunned. So Enchanted Palace also runs a brothel. But that's not right. As far as I know, before Enchanted Palace fell, this 10,000 flower brothel already existed. You brat, your words are really unpleasant. The temptress rolled her eyes and sighed. Forget it, you're quite pleasing to the eye. I'll tell you some secrets. Did you think that after Ong Kwang-tsung razed the Phantom Palace to the ground, I would have no place to stay and could only hide in a brothel? Was that not the case? Yu Qianchou smiled noncommittally. This cheap mistress had really gotten into character. The 100 Charms beauty rolled her eyes again and continued. You should know the Pink Sect, which is ranked 10th in the Devil Dao and ranked 9th after my magical illusion palace fell, right? The Red Pink Sect was known for its charm techniques. The 10,000 flower house in the secular world was opened by the Red Pink Sect. Other than being the illusory demon palace's palace mistress, I'm also the sect master of the Pink Sect. You don't know this, right? Ah. Yu Qianchou was stunned. To be exact, he was confused by this complicated relationship. The 10,000 flower house originally belonged to the magical illusion palace, and now it was opened by the Pink Sect. After sorting out his thoughts, he finally understood. He really didn't expect that this mistress had a double identity. She was actually in charge of two big sections. The 100 Charms beauty said disdainfully. Outsiders thought that the magical illusion palace, which is ranked 5th in the Devil Dao, couldn't withstand the attack of the righteous Daos ranked 6th, Ong Kwang-tsung, and collapsed just like that. But who knew that my magical illusion palace had diverted more than half of its strength to run the Pink Sect? It was really because of the sudden incident that we were caught unprepared by Ong Kwang-tsung and suffered a big loss. Otherwise, with Ong Kwang-tsung's strength, it wouldn't have been so easy to succeed. I don't understand this. Yu Qianchou frowned and said, why did your magical illusion palace divert more than half of its strength to run the Pink Sect? Wouldn't it be better to spend more effort to improve the magical illusion palace's strength? Otherwise, it wouldn't have suffered losses under Ong Kwang-tsung's hands. Do you think it's easy for me, a woman, to sit in the position of magical illusion palace's palace master? The 100 Charms beauty asked back and faintly let out a breath and said, since I, a woman, have taken the position, I naturally have to come up with means to convince my subordinates. For a long time, my magical illusion palace has always been ranked 5th in the Devil Dao. In the past, which sect master didn't want to improve their strength, and didn't want to take a step forward in the ranking? But if you send them up, the sects above them will inevitably come down. Let's not talk about the righteous Dao's reaction for now. Once you threaten the top-ranked sects, then your sect will inevitably be suppressed by the higher-ups, and it will be very difficult to take a step forward. So when I first took office, I began to quietly divert people to develop the Pink Sect. The effect is very obvious. Those top sects won't spend too much effort to pay attention to such a small sect. With the support of my magical illusion palace, the Pink Sect climbed to the 10th place in just a few years. With this credit, it also allowed me to sit firmly in the position of Magical Illusion Palace Master. Master's wife is really wise and powerful. This disciple admires you. After flattering her, Xianxia smiled and said, Master's wife told me such a big secret. Aren't you afraid that this disciple will leak it? Leak my secret? The 100 Charms beauty looked him up and down, looking at him like she was looking at a stupid pig, and sneered, You should worry about yourself. The Deluo sect wants to get rid of you as soon as possible. Ong Kwangtsung has even put up a bounty for your capture. The entire Cultivation Alliance is looking for you everywhere. And the Devil Dao is also looking for you everywhere. Unless you continue to hide in the National Pillar General's office and continue to be a servant, don't show your face in the cultivation world. Once your whereabouts are exposed, you should be prepared to be killed by the righteous Dao or join the Devil Dao. Xianxia was stunned. He naturally didn't know about this and couldn't help but smile and said, Master's wife, are you trying to scare me? I'm just a core formation realm disciple. How could I cause such a big commotion between the righteous and Devil Dao? The 100 Charms beauty casually plucked the strings of the zither beside her and leisurely said, The person who provides Xianxia's whereabouts will be rewarded with 1 million high-grade spirit stones. The person who takes Xianxia's head will be rewarded with 5 million high-grade spirit stones. And the person who captures Xianxia alive will be rewarded with 10 million high-grade spirit stones. If you don't believe me, go to the capital and shout, I am Xianxia. Then you will know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Xianxia looked towards the direction of the dimly lit capital and his face twitched. He didn't have the guts to try. In fact, he didn't even need to try to know that he killed sect master Ong Kwangtsung, so the other party definitely wouldn't let him go easily. It's fine to be a coward once in a while, but it's not in my character to be a coward all the time. As the saying goes, the first to strike gains the upper hand and the last to strike suffers a calamity. Since both the righteous and Devil Dao are after me, then come. Who's afraid of who? If worst comes to worst, I'll just go back to Utopia and farm. Besides, I haven't fully used my troops yet. A bunch of dogs, do they really think I'm easy to step on? Thinking of this, Xianxia narrowed his eyes and lightly snorted, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his face. The 100 Charms beauty had been sizing him up with a smile. Mistress, you didn't call me here just to tell me this, did you? Xianxia turned around and asked. Of course not. The 100 Charms beauty smiled and said, I also didn't expect to meet you today. I'm telling you this because I know you want to avenge your master, and I also want to avenge your master. That's why I'm telling you this. And Xianxia asked with an inquisitive look in his eyes. The 100 Charms beauty deliberately paused, then chuckled and said, And I also know that you definitely have someone helping you. I heard that when you killed Lu Chongqing in Swallow City, you brought hundreds of men in black, and there seemed to be experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for you to kill Lu Chongqing with your ability. Back then, when I was at the Spirit Stone mine in Ong Kwangtsung, I planted a strand of divine sense on you. Who knew that it would be dispelled in the blink of an eye? It seems that your background isn't simple. Chapter 224. So she was talking about this. Seemed like there were quite a few sects that knew about this. Xianxia praised disapprovingly. Master's wife is really well informed. You even know about this. When it comes to being well informed, I'm afraid there's no sect in the entire cultivation world that can compare to my pink sect. You must know that the purpose of my pink sect opening 10,000 flower houses in various places is to facilitate the investigation and transmission of information. Just like the trouble you've caused in Swallow City, I'll know within an hour, the 100 Charm beauty said proudly. Xianxia was slightly taken aback. The myriad flower brothel had opened almost everywhere in the Wuxia Empire. Thinking about it carefully, the net-like myriad flower brothel was indeed very useful for gathering information. But how much manpower and money did it take? Gathering information in the cultivation world was not something that ordinary people could do. No wonder the enchanted palace was taken down by Ong Kwangtsung. It turned out that it had been emptied long ago. But why did she say this to me? With a thought, Xianxia asked doubtfully, Master's wife, could it be that you want us to join forces and avenge Master together? Smart. 100 Charm beauty smiled and said, I also want to see what kind of people are behind you. Why can't I find anything with my information channels? As he spoke, he leaned over with his body fragrance as if he had no bones. Xianxia was really afraid of her. She would come over and touch him at the slightest provocation. It was true that he wanted to take advantage of her, but he couldn't do anything serious. So he didn't know who was taking advantage of who. He could only pretend to think of something and quietly took a step away. He frowned and said, I do have some people behind me, but I'm afraid it won't be easy for Master's wife to meet them. What? Master's wife, I told you so many secrets. Are you still going to keep them from me? 100 Charm Beauty crossed her arms and smiled. Naturally, it became an attractive scenery. Master's wife, don't misunderstand. Xianxia said solemnly, Master's wife wants to meet them. Unless you are willing to give them all your strength, they won't meet you. This time 100 Charm Beauty couldn't laugh anymore. Give them all my strength? Wasn't this a joke? She stared at Xianxia with sparkling eyes and frowned. Xianxia, tell me honestly, are you being controlled by the person behind you? Let me tell you, even if your master was still alive, he wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself to avenge him. What was this cheap master's wife thinking? Who was controlling who? Xianxia was slightly stunned and then he felt a little touched. It seemed that she really had deep feelings for his master Xianxia. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so concerned about him. He shook his head and said, Master's wife, you are mistaken. I'm not controlled by them. I'm just very good friends with them. Seeing that he was unwilling to speak, the Allure Beauty didn't force him. She sighed and said, It's not that I don't want to let go of the authority in my hands, but the human heart is unpredictable. Before I take revenge for your master, it's impossible for me to hand over the power in my hands to others. Actually, I've been tired of this kind of life for a long time. I can't compare to you men. No matter how high my cultivation is, I'm still a woman. I don't want to live forever either. Her tone was full of helplessness. Xianxia smiled awkwardly. He actually wanted to take control of the Allure Beauty's power, but after hearing her words he could only give up on that idea. The moon was enchanting and the night breeze was refreshing. The two fell into a short silence. Master's wife, can you find the locations of all the spirit stone mines in Deluo sect and Ongquangsung? Xianxia suddenly asked. What do you want? The Allure Beauty suddenly turned around and asked. Hee hee. Xianxia sneered and said, Since you dare to have designs on me, you have to pay a price. Didn't you attack one of Ongquangsung's spirit stone mines in the past? This time I want to learn from Master's wife. The Allure Beauty frowned slightly and said, You want the locations of all the spirit stone mines in both sects? Why? Is it very difficult? Xianxia asked. The Allure Beauty shook her head and said, The information on the spirit stone mines of all the major sects is readily available. I can give it to you anytime you want. However, since I caused a ruckus in the past, all the sects have strengthened their defenses around the spirit stone mines. If you have designs on so many places at once, I'm afraid it will be very dangerous. Seeing that she was so concerned about him, Xianxia was once again moved. He smiled and said, Don't worry, Master's wife, I am very afraid of death. I will not joke around with my life. I have my own plans for the specific operation. The Allure Beauty nodded and said, All right, I will organize it for you tonight. If you want, you can come to 10,000 Flower House to find me. Then Disciple will thank Master's wife in advance. Xianxia saluted, then looked at the sky and said, Disciple still has something to do, so I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, he summoned a flying sword and was about to leave. However, the Allure Beauty laughed and said, Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Are you afraid that I will eat you? Damn. She was just being serious for a while. Why is she here again? Xianxia looked around. This really was a good place to do dirty things. There was no need to be afraid of people disturbing him. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, Could it be that Master's wife wants Disciple to accompany you to see the scenery? Not today. Next time I will find a chance to let you accompany me to see the scenery. The Allure Beauty giggled non-stop, walked closer and said, You are leaving just like this? Are you not going to give Master's wife a gift? Master's wife, whatever you want, just say it. As long as it is within my means, I will give it to you, Xianxia said helplessly. Meeting this kind of master's wife, there was really nothing he could do. He was really afraid that she would ask him to marry her, so should he refuse? The Allure Beauty didn't answer for a long time. Instead, she leisurely paced around a few times. The moonlight vividly showed off the curves under her thin veil. Xianxia took a breath and looked to the side. I heard that the 2 songs circulating in the cultivation world were composed by you. Why don't you compose a song for Master's wife as a gift? This won't force you, right? The Allure Beauty finally said the gift she wanted for their first meeting. Since Master's wife has asked, how can disciple dare to disobey? Master's wife, please wait a moment, let me think about it. After finishing speaking, Xianxia also let out a sigh of relief. So this is what you want, I will just casually pirate a song for you. Seeing him slowly pondering, the Allure Beauty's eyes lit up. It should be known that Xianxia's 2 songs had spread throughout the cultivation world. Everyone would regard them as classics, especially women who especially liked them. However, there were not many people who knew that it was composed by this Xianxia in front of her. Unexpectedly, as soon as she asked, he actually agreed. Seeing him in deep thought, the Allure Beauty thought that he was racking his brains to come up with ideas in his mind. However, she didn't know which song he was thinking about. Of course, the song couldn't be too avant-garde. It definitely wouldn't work if he came up with something like, hum, hum, ha, use nunchakus. It must be something that ancient people could understand and suitable for her. After a long time, she saw him nodding as if he had understood something. He walked to the Allure Beauty's zither, grabbed it, walked to a rock on the cliff, sat cross-legged, put the zither on his knees and slightly adjusted his mood. Then he said indifferently, Master's wife, this song is for you on behalf of Master. The Allure Beauty was stunned. Just when she was about to say something, she heard the sound of the zither, so she had to calm down and listen. As her thoughts sank along with the prelude, Hao Wui's appearance in the past appeared in front of her eyes, as if he wanted to tell her something. At this time, Xianxia had already started to sing along with the sound of the zither. Don't mention the past again. Life is full of ups and downs. Even if the memory can't be erased, love and hate are still in the heart. If you really want to cut off the past and let tomorrow continue, you don't have to painstakingly ask for my news. Love is a difficult problem, dazzling and confusing. Maybe it's possible to forget the pain, but it's too difficult to forget you. You never really left, you are always in my heart, I still love you, I can't do anything about myself. Because I still have a dream, I still have you in my heart, I'm always easily moved by the past, I always feel heartache for you. Don't be reluctant to stay in the years, I have thousands of unintentional tenderness, don't ask me if we will meet again, don't care if my words are insincere. Why don't you understand, as long as there is love there will be pain, one day you will know life will not be different without me, life is already too fast, I'm so afraid, always with tears in my eyes, forget me, there will be no pain, leave the past in the wind. The moonlight was like silver, the mountain wind was blowing, Xianxia sat on the edge of the cliff and sang with all his heart. At this time the temptress was no longer as seductive as before, her eyes were already full of tears, she looked like she was scared out of her wits, as if she was talking to someone, her mouth muttered, don't mention the past. I really have to cut the past. Maybe it's possible to forget the pain, but it's not easy to forget you. You are always in my heart. As long as there is love there will be pain. Forget me there will be no pain, leave the past in the wind. Wait, are you talking to me? After playing and singing a few times, Xianxia let out a breath, stood up and turned around. Seeing the heartbroken look of the temptress, he was suddenly stunned, he couldn't help but shake his head. Another infatuated woman, I hope this song is helpful to you, it can make you think better. He walked over and handed over the zither in his hand, softly said, Master's wife. The temptress wiped away her tears, took the zither and said with a trembling voice, Xian, what is the name of this song? Seeing her like that, Xianxia really couldn't bear to tell her the name of the song, but he couldn't think of a better name at the moment, so he could only bite the bullet and said, the name of the song is When Love is Past. Master's wife, disciple will take his leave first. After saying that, he flew away from the crime scene on his sword. Under the moonlight, on the peak of the mountain, there were a few old pines, the night wind was blowing gently, a woman wrapped in red silk was holding the zither, muttering, When love is past. When love is past. Chapter 225. In the myriad fragrance garden of Fuxian Island, Ferdinand had been suffering. The father-daughter relationship that had improved with great difficulty had now plummeted back to its original state. Furong once again regarded her father as a stranger. She even avoided him everywhere and didn't want to see him. The cause of the matter was naturally that Xianxia, who was expelled from Fuxian Island. Ferdinand was also a shrewd person. He naturally saw that his daughter had already lost her chastity to that bastard. However, it was useless even if he was unhappy. Who asked his daughter to like him? He could only wander around the sect every day hoping to get more news about that brat. Furong didn't have the mood to cultivate these few days. She lay on the bed in the room all day, staring at a purple gold necklace in a daze. This was refined by Xianxia for her. There was a small transparent crystal ball hanging on the purple necklace. There was a little red in the small ball which was very beautiful. Xianxia once told her that the red inside was a drop of his blood. She didn't know how it was put in. You don't want me anymore? You're going to abandon me? Furong looked at the necklace in her hand and muttered to herself. Her tears wet the pillow again. She didn't know how many times she had repeated this sentence these few days. Who doesn't want you anymore? A familiar voice suddenly appeared in the room. Furong turned her head to look. Xianxia, who was dressed in black and wearing a crooked hat, was looking at her and laughing. Furong sat up abruptly and rubbed her eyes a few times. She thought she had seen wrongly. Xianxia laughed and said, "What? You don't even recognize me, your husband?" Xianxia. Furong's eyes lit up. She immediately ran down from the bed barefooted and directly jumped onto Xianxia. She hugged him tightly and didn't let go. She buried her head and cried non-stop. Xianxia hugged her but with both hands and touched it. He'd scared and said, "Why are you full of bones? Have you not eaten for a long time? It's not as comfortable as before." Hearing this, Furong immediately stopped crying and got down from his body. Using her hand to feel his body, she frowned and said, "I seem to have lost some weight. Don't you like it?" Sigh. Xianxia let out a long sigh and carried her to the bed. He crouched down, grabbed her feet that were dirty from stepping on the ground and carefully patted them clean. He picked up the shoes under the bed and helped her put them on while saying, "My family's Furong is pretty, but if you're as thin as firewood then you're not pretty. In the future remember to eat more. Don't think that you can stop eating just because you've reached the core formation realm. Have you seen those old guys on Fuxian Island who often don't eat? Let's not talk about being old, dry and skinny. Do you think you'll look good like that? I don't like it anyway." Furong thought about what he said and a withered old face appeared in her mind. She also became like that. Furong shuddered at the thought of it. She hurriedly nodded and said, "Then I'll eat more in the future. You can take me away too." Xianxia's face twitched a little. It wasn't hard to take her away. The key was that there was already a Chu Ping-er in Utopia, so there was no problem with Bai Suzhen. He just didn't know how Chu Ping-er and Furong would react when they met. It was better not to let them meet for the time being. After thinking it through, his expression suddenly became serious. He sat side by side with her and said, "Furong, I want you to do me a favor." Furong, who was previously crying, now seemed to have become a different person with Xianxia by her side. She nodded excitedly and said, "What do you want me to help with? Do you need spiritual herb seeds? I'll ask my father for it. If he doesn't give it to me, I'll help you steal it." In her impression, every time he asked her for help, it was nothing more than getting spiritual herb seeds. Xianxia's face twitched again. "With your level you can steal things from Myriad Fragrance Garden? Wasn't it because that old fellow Ferdinand turned a blind eye to it?" He coughed and said cautiously, "I don't want you to help me with this. I want you to stay in supporting Xian Island and help me be a spy." "What is a spy?" Furong's eyes widened in surprise. Xianxia acted as if he was serious and whispered in her ear. After Furong heard it, her expression also became serious. She nodded and said, "Don't worry. I'll write down all the news from supporting Xian Island. I'll tell you when you come. Then I'll leave the matters here to you. I'll leave first." Xianxia stood up and said, "Wait." Furong hugged him and said shyly, "Don't you miss me?" Xianxia was stunned, but he immediately understood. This girl used to be afraid, but now she's tasting it again. He looked around and chuckled, "So it's here? It's not convenient. It won't be good if someone hears us." Furong bit her lip and said with a red face, "We'll be fine as long as we don't make a sound." Is that so? Yu Qianqiu nodded his head. Then he put his mouth next to her ear and said with a sinister smile, "Then let's try it?" His words were polite, but in fact his hands were already helping Furong undress. As soon as Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia, he went straight to Guan Yu's room in the military camp. He took the black clothes from Guan Yu and asked while changing, "How's the new battle plan going?" "No problem," Guan Yu said in a reporting tone. "According to your request, they've been trained to the high standard of ending battles quickly. Qin Feng has also provided enough qi recovery pills according to your request, and they've been distributed to everyone in the army. Each person has 2 storage bags with the capacity of 3 rooms." "Very good." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Have you made arrangements for the 100 people I got last time?" "They've already started cultivating. The basic cultivation techniques are mainly based on the supporting Immortal Islands techniques. Qin Feng has already distributed the newly refined qi storage pills, which will allow them to enter the qi refinement stage as soon as possible. The women under Sister Bai are also planting a large number of spiritual herbs for refining foundation pills. Qin Feng has also started refining foundation pills. I believe that when they reach the 10th level of the qi refinement stage, all of them will be able to break through to the foundation building stage in one go," Guan Yu reported. Yu Qianqiu thought for a moment and said, "Those who are too old after breaking through to the foundation building stage, let them open up wastelands and farm. After all, they're old and it's too late to start cultivating now. Even if they continue to cultivate, there won't be any big breakthroughs. Let them live a few more years. Fighting and killing things aren't suitable for them. It just so happens that we can solve the increasingly tight food supply situation here. Let's try our best to be self-sufficient. That way we won't have to always go out to buy food. If there's a chance, I'll get more people here." "Got it." Guan Yu nodded. Yu Qianqiu's hand that was changing paused and he said in a deep voice, "For this battle, you have to be mentally prepared. I'm afraid that some casualties are unavoidable." "I understand. It's impossible to not die in a battle." Guan Yu's tone was a little heavy. After changing into a set of black clothes, the 2 of them walked together to the military camp's war room. Inside there was a long table. The company and platoon leaders of each company had been waiting for a long time. When they saw the 2 of them enter, someone shouted, "Stand up." All of them stood up with a swish and performed the standard military salute taught by Yu Qianqiu. They said in unison, "Chief." Chapter 226. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and saluted back, saying, "Everyone please sit." With that said, he walked to the end of the long table and sat down. Guan Yu walked to where Yu Qianqiu was supposed to sit. The 2 of them were facing each other, so their heads had been turned. Originally, Guan Yu was unwilling. Logically speaking, his current position should be the place where the leader of the team was qualified to sit. However, Yu Qianqiu refused because he had not been here for a long time. Guan Yu was the actual person in charge of the daily training and management here. He had to help Guan Yu establish his prestige because Guan Yu, as the chief instructor, had the lowest cultivation level in this group. Although he was working hard to catch up, it was enough for Yu Qianqiu to firmly grasp this point. It was enough for him to be the spiritual leader of this team. The platoon leaders began to report their respective training situation to Guan Yu. Like an outsider, Yu Qianqiu listened attentively and took advantage of this free time to size up everyone. He was quite satisfied with the results. There was no longer the old-fashioned cultivator expression on everyone's faces. Instead, everyone was in high spirits, looking a bit like soldiers. After listening to the reports, Guan Yu began to announce the operation plan to everyone. It was not easy to come by this plan. Some time ago, Yu Qianqiu had obtained the locations of the various sects' spirit stone mines from the Allure Beauty. He had picked the Daoist sect and Ong Kwangsung's mines to study. Only then did he realize that the Allure Beauty had prepared a lot of detailed information for him. The guards of each spirit stone mine, as well as their daily routine, were clearly marked. Yu Qianqiu followed the map and personally investigated each and every one of the spirit stone mines of the Daoist sect and Ong Kwangsung. He did so in secret, not daring to reveal his whereabouts. Finally, he came up with this operation plan. There are 15 spirit stone mines in the Luo sect and 6 in Ong Kwangsung. Our goal this time is to loot all 21 of them. After Guan Yu revealed his objective, he distributed the Jade Archives to everyone and said, "The Jade Archives in your hands contain detailed information about the various spirit stone mines." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They hadn't expected the battle plan to be so huge. They had to attack 21 spirit stone mines in one go. Expressions of difficulty appeared on their faces. Xianxia, who was sitting quietly at the back, suddenly laughed and said, "Everyone, don't hold back. If you have any opinions, feel free to voice them out. Our goal is naturally to better complete this mission." Someone immediately stood up and said, "Leader, I'm from the Exalted Sect, so I have some understanding of their spirit stone mines. Ever since the Phantom Palace attacked Ongquangsung's spirit stone mines, the defenses of the Exalted Sect's spirit stone mines have been strengthened. Every spirit stone mine now has an early-stage tribulation passing elder overseeing it. Although our 3 companies have the advantage in numbers and strength, we don't have anyone who can fight against a tribulation passing cultivator. I'm afraid that even if we manage to take down one mine, we will still suffer heavy casualties. Let's not talk about Ongquangsung. It's basically impossible for us to take down all 15 of the Exalted Sect's spirit stone mines one by one." When he finished speaking, Xianxia raised his hand and gestured for him to sit down. Then he smiled and nodded at Guan Yu. "The leader has already taken your concerns into consideration and has made detailed arrangements to deal with them. Let me brief you all on the overall situation." Guan Yu glanced at the crowd and said in a loud voice, "Ongquangsung has 6 spirit stone mines. Each mine is guarded by a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, 3 mid-stage nascent soul and 3 early-stage nascent soul cultivators, a total of 15 core formation cultivators, more than 50 foundation establishment cultivators, and 150 miners of varying cultivation levels. This kind of strength is a piece of cake for us. It won't be a problem to take them down one by one. As for the Exalted Sect's 15 spirit stone mines." At this point, Guan Yu's expression became serious. He stood up and continued, "Each mine is guarded by an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator. There are 10 nascent soul cultivators, nearly 50 core formation and foundation establishment cultivators, and nearly 200 miners. Most of them are at the foundation establishment stage. Most of them are at the qi condensation stage like Ongquangsung. If the Exalted Sect didn't send an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator to guard the mines, it wouldn't be a problem. In view of this, Leader has already set up an early tribulation transcendence cultivator in each of the 15 Daoist sect mines. As soon as we take action, the cultivator will help us tie down the enemy tribulation transcendence expert. And if something goes wrong, Leader will ask Misty Palace's Big Sister Bai to personally take action. I'm sure no one doubts Big Sister Bai's strength." Everyone exchanged glances and nodded. Naturally, this arrangement wouldn't be a problem. However, where did Leader find 15 tribulation passing cultivators? Could it be that Leader has another force? At this time, someone stood up and asked, "Instructor, this is a good idea, but as long as we attack one of the spirit stone mines, the sects will be alerted. What if the Exalted Sect and Ongquangsung send a large number of experts? I believe that both the Exalted Sect and Ongquangsung are not people we can withstand. How are we going to attack the other spirit stone mines then?" Xianxia sat at the back with a smile and didn't say anything. His subordinate's words were a little discouraging, but he didn't mind at all. This was exactly the atmosphere he needed. Only when everyone was involved would they be motivated to work together. Only then could they make up for the flaws in the battle plan. After all, he wasn't an immortal who could plan everything perfectly. Guan Yu raised his hand and gestured for the man to sit down. He said, "Company Commander first, Leader has already considered your concerns. Therefore, there is a very important task for your company to complete in this battle plan. Company Commander first, I want you to find a map of the mines in the Jade Archive. The location marked 1 on the map is the location of the communication array in each mine. Before we attack, you will first take out a platoon of soldiers and hand them over to Leader to command. Leader will lead them to completely destroy the communication array in the Spirit Stone mines. This is to prevent the news of the attack from leaking out. At the same time, all the troops will end the battle as quickly as possible. Do any of you have any questions?" Everyone shook their heads and sent their divine senses into the Jade Archives to examine them. Sure enough, there were maps of 21 spirit stone mines within. Upon closer inspection, they realized that their training during this period of time had been for the purpose of preparing to attack these spirit stone mines. The location marked 1 should be the location of the communication array in the mines. Guan Yu looked around at everyone and said in a deep voice, "Since there are no more questions, the attack will proceed according to the latest training method. Dismissed and get ready." Yes. Everyone got up and quickly left the war room to make their own arrangements. At this moment Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice, "Yun Chong, in an hour, all combat troops will assemble and depart." An hour later, a hurried and loud bugle call rang out in the camp. A group of fully equipped men in black clothes and masks quickly rushed out of the barracks and assembled in 3 groups at the plaza. Guan Yu rode his tall horse and paced back and forth below the stage. Yu Qianzhou stood on the stage with his hands behind his back and looked down at the people below. At this moment, a ray of light descended from the entrance of the camp. Chu Ping had arrived with little Wu Chou. The two of them had been attracted by the bugle call. During this period of time, little Wu Chou had become attached to this beautiful sister-in-law of his. Every day she would bring him along to experience the feeling of flying on a sword. The little brat was having a great time. Just as the two of them were about to step into the camp, they were stunned by the formation inside. There were so many people standing together in a strange black color. They were lined up in a neat square formation, but it was so quiet that only the sound of breathing could be heard. A strong killing intent emanated from the camp, forcing the two of them to stay away from it. Little Wu Chou was startled by the aura. He hid behind his sister-in-law and peeked at his brother who was looking down at them from the stage. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the two people at the entrance. He raised an arm and opened his palm towards the crowd. After he covered everyone with his divine sense, he shouted in a deep voice, "Depart." In an instant all the people on and off the stage disappeared. There was no one left in the camp. Chu Ping'er and little Wu Chou didn't dare to go in. They held hands and left in silence. Chapter 227. Behind a barren hillside, hundreds of men in black suddenly appeared. They immediately formed a battle formation and guarded the surroundings. Their movements were quite well trained and their cooperation was quite tacit. Yu Qianzhou was dressed in black, but he did not cover his face like the others. Only Guan Yu, who was sitting on the horse, was still dressed in a green robe. The wind whistled. Yu Qianzhou looked around. This was the location he had chosen when he was scouting. From a tactical point of view, this place was more suitable for gathering troops than the Spirit Stone mine not far away. Moreover, it was the most suitable place for so many people to advance stealthily. "Follow me in a row." Yu Qianzhou shouted softly. A flying sword gently lifted him up, and he flew along the undulating mountain range. A row of people followed closely behind, all of them moving forward while staying a little above the ground. Guan Yu waved his hand and the rest of the people quickly dispersed in groups. Only 3 company commanders were left by his side. Yu Qianzhou brought more than 30 people to a call and hid. Ong Kwangsung's spirit stone mine was at the bottom of a slope in front of them. They could already hear the shouts of the people inside. If they showed their heads now, they would definitely be discovered by the people on the high ground. He needed to wait for the others to surround the spirit stone mine within the stipulated time. Then he would launch a sudden attack. At that time, even if the other party discovered them, it would not be much of a problem. It would be enough to catch them off guard. There were no unusual movements in the surroundings. Obviously, the other people's encirclement had not been discovered by Ong Kwangsung's people. At this time, if someone looked down from the sky, they would see that there were hundreds of black shadows surrounding the spirit stone mine. In fact, this method was not very safe. The safest way would be to suddenly appear in the spirit stone mine and quickly launch a surprise attack. But the key was that when Yu Qianzhou came to investigate, there was no way to enter the mine. He could only secretly observe from the periphery. He could not run in and leave a positioning mark in a suitable place for everyone to appear instantly. Because Yu Qianzhou had the golden pearl, if he controlled his breathing and remained motionless, it was estimated that no one would be able to discover him. However, if he were to sneak in, there would inevitably be some movement. With his cultivation, it would be very difficult to hide from the nascent soul experts inside. Estimating that it was about time, Yu Qianqiu made a ready gesture to everyone. One of his hands made a gesture of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everyone stared at the movements of his hands, and the flying sword in their hands was ready. When the last finger was flicked, Yu Qianqiu took the lead and fiercely flew out of the call on his sword. The 30 or so people below him all flew out in a flash. Yu Qianqiu's mind moved. His fingers pointed to a tall wooden building in front of him. Hundreds of flying swords suddenly appeared around him. Xiu xiu. They shot out like a storm. On the wooden building, there were 2 disciples of Foundation Establishment Stage leaning on it and watching the scenery with boredom. Although their duty was to observe the surrounding situation and prevent sudden danger, no one would think that robbing the Spirit Stone mine would happen easily. After all, Ongquang was not an ordinary sect. The Magic Illusion Palace was an example. When they heard the sound and turned around to find the hundreds of cold lights, it was too late. The flying swords were as fast as lightning. The speed of the flying swords was Yu Qianqiu's forte. It was suitable for a sneak attack. Puff puff puff. The hundreds of flying swords smashed the wooden building on the high road. A few puffs of blood exploded and limbs fell. The hundreds of flying swords quickly returned to Yu Qianqiu's side like locusts, protecting his body. More than 30 people quickly flew over the collapsed wooden building. Yu Qianqiu pointed the sword in his hand at a cave. The information provided by the Enchantress of 100 Charms proved that it was the place where the communication array was set up. The dozens of people shot over at their fastest speed. In the meantime, a few Ongquang disciples ran over. However, they were unable to block the fierce attack led by the nascent Soul Stage black-clothed members. With a single blow, several people were already dismembered. Just as a few people stuck their heads out of the cave to see what was going on outside, dozens of people each took out a spirit talisman and threw it in. A series of loud crackling sounds came from inside, followed by miserable screams. Among the dozens of people, a few people immediately guarded the cave entrance. The rest all rushed in. With the sound of movement, Guan Yu rode his horse to the top of a spirit stone mine. He stroked his long beard and pulled out a large flag from his storage pouch. Hi! With a sound he inserted it into the mountain top. The hero flag fluttered in the wind. This was the signal for an all-out attack. How dare you? Who dares to provoke me, Ongquang? A figure flew out from a row of wooden houses in the mine. Then, as if a nest had exploded, all the disciples guarding the mine of Ongquang flew out. Looking around, a group of black-clothed people had already surrounded the mine in the mountain. From the stunned expressions of many people, it could be seen that they clearly had not reacted to what was happening. A small black flag appeared in the hands of the third company's commander beside Guan Yu. He raised his hand and waved it. More than 100 people belonging to the third company immediately shot into the crowd from all directions and attacked fiercely. Immediately, the scene of the Ongquang disciples surrounding the more than 100 people of the third company appeared. For a moment, there was a flash of light, and the sounds of fighting could be heard incessantly. With a cold snort from Guan Yu, a small black flag also appeared in the hands of the second company's commander. He raised it and waved it left and right. The Ongquang disciples who were fighting the third company in the mine were immediately surrounded by more than 100 people from the outside. A massacre had begun. Ongquang was immediately attacked from all sides. He was in a precarious situation and could be annihilated at any time. This was a battle without any suspense. The people from Utopia were originally the elite disciples of the top 3 sects in the Orthodox and Devil sects. They had been through a long period of killing in the Demon Ghost region. In terms of fighting, they were top-notch experts among people of the same cultivation level. Half of them were at the nascent soul stage and half of them were at the core formation stage. After going through military training, they emphasized on mutual cooperation. If one person attacked, there would definitely be 2 to 3 people to help defend. As for Ongquang, most of them were at the foundation establishment stage. There was only one person who was at the late stage of the nascent soul stage. That person had long been entangled and beaten up by a few nascent soul stage cultivators. The company commander raised his hand and clenched his fist. The remaining 2 platoons immediately narrowed the encirclement to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to escape. On the other side, after Yu Qianchou successfully destroyed the communication array in the cave with his men, he immediately ordered the platoon to ignore the other fights and split into groups of 2 to 3 to search for the miners in the various caves. The miners were disciples who did not have any artifacts, so they had to be captured alive. Those who could not be captured alive were to be killed on the spot. The platoon immediately accepted the order and dispersed. Yu Qianchou flew to Guan Yu's side. It just so happened that the late-stage nascent soul cultivator from Ong Kwangtsung saw that the situation was hopeless and tried to break through the encirclement to escape. Yu Qianchou coldly glanced at him and shouted in a deep voice, "Kill!" He did not have a good impression of these so-called elders from Ong Kwangtsung. The 3 late nascent soul stage company commanders beside Guan Yu flashed over at the same time, and with a joint attack in midair, they knocked the man down on the spot. The 3 nascent soul stage cultivators who were originally surrounding him also flew up from below, 3 on top and 3 below. The 6 of them attacked in midair, and the late nascent soul stage cultivator from the Azure Light sect let out a miserable scream, and turned into a rain of blood. The 3 company commanders flew back to Guan Yu's side as if nothing had happened. The battle ended very quickly. From the start of the attack to the end, it only took a quarter of an hour. Yu Qianchou looked at his subordinates in the field. After the battle, not a single one of them died. Only a few of them were slightly injured. With such an absolute advantage, coupled with careful preparation and a surprise attack, they should be able to achieve such a result. Yu Qianchou nodded in satisfaction and shouted, "Don't hesitate, clean up the battlefield. Take everything you can quickly." The remaining 2 platoons immediately rushed down. At the same time, more than 10 nascent soul stage cultivators flew in all directions to help. The group of people immediately moved. Those Ong Kwangtsung disciples who were lying on the ground and dying were immediately stabbed a few more times. There was no need to leave those who couldn't be saved alive. This was one of the subjects in the previous drill. Then a large-scale sweep began. Storage bags and the like were directly pulled out from the corpses. Even a flying sword that had fallen to the ground was not spared. The platoon that had been ordered by Yu Qianchou to capture the miners escorted a group of people out one after another. These miners were people who were not well liked in Ong Kwangtsung, and they had suffered a lot here. During the capture process, almost no one resisted. At this moment, when they saw the corpses of the Ong Kwangtsung disciples on the ground, they did not have a trace of pity on their faces. Instead, when they faced the men in black around them, their expressions were filled with fear, not knowing what would happen to them. The platoon leader came over and reported, "Leader, all the miners that can be captured are here." Yu Qianchou waved his hand to dismiss him. He leaped into the air and pressed down with his palm. His divine sense enveloped the trembling miners, and the platoon of people instantly entered Utopia. He then walked to the side of the Ong Kwangtsung disciples who were injured but could still be healed. With a wave of his hand, he sent them back to Utopia. After the entire spirit stone mine was swept, everyone quickly gathered together. Guan Yu took out a small black flag with the word "Hero" embroidered on it in gold. He waved his hand and shot it at a stone pillar. With a ding, the black flag was inserted into it. Guan Yu returned to the team. Yu Qianchou waved his hands and everyone disappeared. The spirit stone mine of Ong Kwangtsung, which had been bathed in blood, was dead silent. Only the shattered corpses on the ground could prove that a fierce battle had taken place here. Chapter 228. In Utopia's military camp, when everyone returned, Bai Suzhen had already led a group of women to stand around them. They were either on the roofs or on the walls, watching over the people who had just been captured. Looking at their dispirited and pained expressions, Yu Qianchou naturally understood what Bai Suzhen had done to them. "I'll give everyone 5 minutes to rest," Yu Qianchou shouted from the field. When his gaze met Bai Suzhen's concerned gaze, he shook his head and smiled, indicating that there was no danger. After fighting with all his might, he felt that his primordial energy had been depleted. He immediately lifted his hood and took out an energy recovery pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Everyone smiled and walked to the corner of the square and began to pour out the spoils of war from the storage pouches. It was hard to tell how many things were stored in the storage pouches, but once they were poured out, it was enough to scare people. Hundreds of people shook out the storage pouches, and the things they collected suddenly piled up like a small mountain. There was a large pile of miscellaneous things, especially spirit stones. Bai Suzhen nodded slightly, and the women under her immediately flew over. They took out their storage bags and began to sort out the items. For example, the spirit stones of the lower, middle and lower grades were all stored separately. When Yu Qianqiu saw that the female disciples were very familiar with many people in the military, a thought occurred to him and he nodded to himself. Some of them looked like a good match. It was time to allow them to take root here. Only then would they truly treat this place as their home. The soldiers here should be professional. When they were free they could go home and live their lives. Only when they had a life would there be hope. It was not a long-term solution to rely solely on spiritual rule. As their spiritual leader he should consider their future. When the 5 minutes were up, Guan Yu gave the order, and the special forces in black gathered again. Yu Qianqiu looked at the people in front of him and said with a smile, "I just thought of something. I feel that many of our members are a good match with the female members of Ethereal Palace. I've decided that after the completion of this mission, men and women can freely interact with each other during their free time. If there's someone who has feelings for each other, they can look for your instructors to register and become Dao companions. What do you guys think?" "Good, good, good." All the warriors cheered excitedly. Some even shouted, "Long live the leader." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "Damn it. Why do I feel like Hitler?" Guan Yu frowned. Why did boss say something like this before the big battle? Wasn't he afraid of affecting morale? Bai Suzhen looked over in surprise. She didn't know why Yu Qianqiu would suddenly have such an idea. The eyes of the female disciples who were tidying up sparkled and many of them blushed. It was obvious that there was a man they liked in the group. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. After everyone quietened down he said with a smile, "Let's make this clear first. It has to be voluntary. No coercion is allowed. Otherwise I won't let him off. Anyway, Utopia is big enough. When the time comes I'll mark out a piece of land. Those who become Dao companions will have Ethereal Palace build a house for everyone. Other than the normal training and missions, everyone can live a normal life. Currently there are more men than women here, but don't worry. In the future there will be more and more women in Utopia. After this mission is completed, I'll come up with a plan as soon as possible. Long live the leader. Long live the leader." A group of old men shouted excitedly. "Prepare to set off." Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice. He who had been smiling just now suddenly turned hostile. Everyone was stunned and immediately quietened down. The former opened his palm and enveloped everyone with his divine sense. The group of people in the field disappeared. The battle started again. Due to the careful deployment, there were still no accidents this time, and they successfully took down another spirit stone mine. From the situation of this attack, it was obvious that Ong Kwangtsung did not know about the previous attack. This mine was still sparsely guarded. At the same time, it also meant that the battle plan they had come up with was feasible. In less than 8 hours, all of Ong Kwangtsung's spirit stone mines had been looted. Yu Qianqiu wanted to see how Ong Kwangtsung and the other old fellows would react when they found out that all of their spirit stone mines had been looted. This time they were much more ruthless than the Illusion Palace. Not only had the 6 spirit stone mines been looted, even the dam miners had been taken away. Even if Ong Kwangtsung wanted to start working again, where could he find nearly 1,000 miners? This type of work was not something ordinary people could do. At the thought of this, Yu Qianqiu felt that his anger had been vented. How dare they offer a bounty to capture me? This is the consequence, damn it. Even if you can solve the problem of the miners, you will definitely have to send a large number of people to guard the mines. And the strength you will send will probably not be weaker than this time, right? If the strength is weaker than this time, I don't mind looting again. If I can split a large number of forces from Ong Kwangtsung's old nest, I don't mind going up to Ong Kwangtsung and taking a bite or two of them. Damn it. In fact, the operation this time was not very smooth sailing. During the last battle something regrettable happened. 2 core formation stage members died in battle, and their corpses were brought back to Utopia. It was indeed painful for Yu Qianqiu. These people were all elites with rich combat experience. In addition, they had been nurtured for so many years. Although 2 people had died, it did not stop Yu Qianqiu's determination to loot the De Luo sect again. With a command, the troops set off again. At a place not far from the Deluo sect's spirit stone mine, Yu Qianzhou put on a golden mask that he had asked Qin Feng to make before he left. According to the agreement with the Allure Beauty, he found the early-stage tribulation passing elder that she had sent. The elder was quite curious about Yu Qianzhou. He did not know what kind of person was behind the golden mask, and he could not see through his cultivation. He had no choice but to put on the mask. First, it was to distinguish his identity from the other team members. Second, he did not want the people sent by the Allure Beauty to recognize him. If he was recognized, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause for appearing in so many places in a day. When the elder saw the black-clothed special forces that Yu Qianzhou had brought with him, he was shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a group of cultivators in the cultivation world, especially after the attack had begun. With a gesture, hundreds of people separated and regrouped. They did not even need to say a word. The tacit understanding between the attack and defense was simply amazing. In the cultivation world, a person could leave his back to others without any worries. Just how much trust was this? Before the elder made his move, he also put on the black outfit that Yu Qianzhou had given him. Naturally, he was afraid that the people from the Deluo sect would recognize him as an elder of the Phantom Palace. After he fought with the Deluo sect elder, Yu Qianzhou's troops went all out. Since 2 of their comrades had died last time, this time they were as ruthless as they could be. They would not let go of their opponents until they were completely out of breath. Once the aura of breaking 1,000 armies was unleashed, it would be incredible. The Deluo sect, which was originally thought to be much more difficult to defeat than Ong Kuang Tsung, was unexpectedly faster than Ong Kuang Tsung. However, Yu Qianzhou's idea of leaving as many people alive as possible to bring back to Utopia was shattered. All the Deluo sect disciples who were guarding the mine were killed. The battle on Yu Qianzhou's side had already ended. The 2 tribulation stage cultivators fought from the sky to the ground, and from the ground back to the sky. Seeing that the elder sent by the Allure Beauty was unable to defeat the Deluo sect elder and even seemed to be at a disadvantage, a few nascent soul cultivators rushed forward to help. However, something unfortunate happened. The difference in strength between the tribulation stage and the nascent soul stage was like the difference between heaven and earth. The Deluo sect elder swung his sword in the air and a sharp sword light slashed out. 2 of the 4 nascent soul cultivators who rushed forward immediately turned into a rain of blood. Yu Qianzhou's eyes were bloodshot. He roared crazily and called the remaining 2 people back. Then Bai Suzhen, dressed in white, appeared in the air. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.